emotional arguments about like women will die. None of this matters.
They
It's
will.
Like, then
Okay.
why
What
are
an
you debating?
emotional argument.
Why are you
That's
debating
so
the fucking topic?
emotional. So,
Wait, so-
like hysterical that women will fucking die because this is overturned and we aren't supposed to feel good because there's
it's
going to
not
be
the
a dissenting
fucking topic.
opinion.
It's just talking
Okay, Fabian.
points.
Oh, it's not the topic.
What you don't get to do is take an ice pick to the central nervous system and then hammer it in and then take clamps and take their little fingers and toes and their body and rip it apart piece by piece and then vacuum out the rest of the body and then say, but hey, it was an 80% chance that the woman was going to die. Well, what you did was fucking worse.
Wait,
If you want to do a
Yeah,
serious
not only
wait,
is
wait,
it
wait,
not
wait,
only
wait,
not
wait,
women,
wait,
it's-
Fabian just
Yeah,
wanted
some
to-
women should die.
Okay. Welcome everybody to a very special edition of the Hippy Dippy Roundtable. As has been usually, I'm still live from Poland, but I won't be for very much longer. I think I'll maybe have one more Hippy Dippy Roundtable from Poland after this. And this edition is very special for a few reasons. Number one, because we're implementing some changes. And number two, because it is the Roe v. Wade edition. Obviously, we all know that there has been a massive leak on Alito's position on his draft opinion that seems to indicate that Roe v. Wade is about to be overturned. And so all of the topics today, all the discussion today is going to be about that. And there's some new rules we're going to be implementing today as well, so I'm going to clarify those rules now. The first rule, as always, is you are going to be abiding by Twitch terms of service today. If you break Twitch terms of service, you will simply be booted from the call, so we can all continue to have our Twitch channels. Secondly, you will not be going after people's immutable characteristics, whether that be weight, whether that be height, whether that be skin color, whether that be sexual orientation, gender, identity, sexuality. You get the idea, right? Don't go after people's immutable characteristics, okay? You will be using people's preferred pronouns. I don't care what you do on your own show, but that's what you're doing on mine. You will not be talking over me while I am talking. While I'm talking, I am simply trying to enforce the rules. I am not trying to make political points or trying to like throw leg drops from the top of the rope. And of course, we have the handy dandy hand raise system. Use it as a last resort, not the first resort. I want to emphasize that again. It's going to take a while to get to you. I assume there's going to be a lot of people who want to talk tonight. So realize that when you raise your hand, that you're not next, that eventually we'll get it over to you. So again, last resort, not first resort. I cannot emphasize this enough. And the new rule that I'm implementing is that if you've got some scuffle, some drama, something with other streamers, okay, outside of this debate, I do not care. Nobody else here should or will be caring, okay? You're not going to take drama that is unrelated to the topic in question and throw it at anybody else on the channel that's on the show today. This is for a few reasons. The first reason is if you do, this derails the conversation. If I start bringing up the fact that aristocracy is a dirty VTuber and that's disgusting, and the fact that she can even stream is a crime against humanity, that can obviously hurt our productive discussion, because now I got to go back and forth with Eris, right? Because she's going to want time to respond, and not everybody else here has amazing takes like I do on VTubers. And so obviously not everybody's going to be interested in the conversation. Okay, so that is why we've implemented that new rule. Also, if you're not talking, please have your mic muted, because everybody, I can hear it when you hit your mic. I can hear it when you type. I can hear it when you eat. I can hear it when your brain is fizzling out. Okay, so please keep your mic muted when you're not doing it. It makes the audio balancing so much easier. And for everybody at home, there's another change. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can probably see Twitch chat. And that is due to the fact that we are now making it a more of a streamer experience on YouTube, and we want you guys to be able to see chat live. So chat, say hello to the YouTube crowd. Congratulations, we are implementing that as well. There is another thing that was supposed to be implemented today, and that is name tags, but we didn't finish the designs in time, and so that'll have to be next time. Okay, is there any questions? Fantastic. So we're going to go straight into introductions, and we're going to start with the VTuber.
I got to potties. I'll be back. I got to go potties.
Why'd you
Oh,
unmute to say that, Fabian? Hey, Eris. I think
So
he
this is
thought he was
French.
talking to his chat. I think. Anyway, continue.
I'm glad he told us. I'm glad he's being honest.
Dylan, I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't listening to anything you just said. So what do you want me to say? Did someone else go first?
Okay, we're gonna throw it over to Josie.
So this is our introduction, correct? We're not in the topic yet?
We're not in the topic yet, correct?
Okay. All right. For sure. Just introductions. Hi, everybody. I am Josie Rose C. I am a Twitch political cozy streamer that does variety content such as reactions and all the fun stuff. Here having fun. I am a professional researcher of trans issues by trade, and I do this by night. So you can find me at Josie Rose C on Twitch TV. You can also find me at those same media handles. So thank you.
I'm very surprised to hear that you're streaming on Cozy now. We're gonna now move over.
And oh.
Yeah, you said you're a Cozy streamer. We're gonna go to Kay next.
I'm Kay Buckoff. I stream when I want to stream. I'm really fucking bad at it. I get really sucked into roleplay games and hate my facial reactions or the words I say after things because I meme to myself so hard when somebody does something super cringe in RP and I won't say it to their face. So I won't stream it. But I've been playing a lot of RP games, Game of Thrones roleplay and stuff like that. If I ever stream, that's what it's going to be. So if you're into that, I guess follow me.
Fantastic. And now I'm gonna throw it over to Maddie Cakes.
Hi, I'm Maddie Cakes. I am a lefty streamer, and by day I am a Democratic political strategist, and I head up digital strategy for a number of congressional, senatorial, and statewide campaigns. So in real life organizer right here. Hello. And when I'm not doing either of those things, I full-time stan Josie.
Fantastic. But now I'm gonna throw it over to Fabian Liberty.
Hi, I'm Scott from Fabian Liberty. Sometimes I have to go potties. Sometimes I don't. I'm an anarcho-capitalist streamer along with my co-hosts. We do news, reactions, the occasional philosophy reading nights, and other fun stuff. You should check us out.
Fantastic. Also part of the Hippy Dippy Championship tag team, the Market Justice Warriors. We're now going to throw it over to Not So Erudite.
Yeah, I am Not So Erudite. I do mostly psychology and kind of sociocultural stuff. I'm also Canadian, so I've done my best to do lots of read-ups on how your guys' systems actually work. And I'm going to guess that I might actually be more informed than some viewers on your guys' own politics. So yeah, excited to chat about this.
Okay, I'm sorry to my chat for not doing my proper research into Not So Erudite and inviting a leaf on today's show. I'm going to now throw it over to Preacher.
Hey, I'm Preacher570 here on Twitch, constitutional conservative. I stream Monday through Friday, do a ministry stream on Sunday. I do politics, but I'm trying to do more like history and just all around variety on my stream.
Fantastic. I'm going to throw it over to Taft Taj.
Thanks, Dylan. I'm Taftaj or April, if that's easier. I post sexy pictures online and occasionally debate politics from a moderate right-leaning perspective. So, yeah, looking forward to getting into it with you guys. I think it'll be fun.
Fantastic. And now, back over to Eris.
Hey, I am Aristocracy TV, and I am a history streamer. I like looking at current political issues from a historical perspective and just doing kind of history streams. I also do a bit of commentary and some drama. And I haven't been streaming regularly, but you should still follow me on Twitter at Aristocracy TV.
Fantastic. So now we're going to get into the first topic, which isn't directly about actually abortion, but it is about Roe v. Wade. That has to do with the leak, which is one of the three topics we're talking about today. There has been a lot of talk, of course, about the consequences of Roe v. Wade being overturned, but there's also been a lot of outrage from the right over this being leaked in the first place, saying that possibly it could be used to intimidate the justices, or that this is a huge issue. And so my question to the room is, how do you guys view the leak of Justice Alito's draft opinion on Roe versus Wade. I'm going to start with Taj.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Alito addresses this to some extent in the later section of the draft. He talks about how it's the court's job to uphold the law and what they believe is constitutionally correct and not bend the will of public opinion. So I don't think that the chance of the decision being affected by public opinion is very high. I think the court is pretty insulated by design from public opinion. I do, however, think that there is obvious political implications for this. Abortion is a big wedge issue for Democrats, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this becoming a really big rallying issue in the coming midterms. Democrats are going to want to have the option to potentially put through legislation to codify abortion into the law. And I think this is going to be a really big political strategy for them. So in that perspective, the leak is going to have huge implications politically.
Okay. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Preacher.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised with the leak. It seems like there's a lot more leaks coming. I'm surprised that it came out of SCOTUS, but I'm not surprised that there's a leak. It seems there's a lot of leaks going on lately, and I don't think it's going to change the court's opinion, but I do believe with Kaftaj, there's going to be implications as far as politically. I think it's ironic that it happened as the border crisis was starting to heat up again. I don't know if I'd go as far as conspiracy theory to say it was done to distract from that, but it's going to be a rally cry for the Democrats going into the midterms, and I definitely believe they're going to be beating drums around that, and we'll see. But I do believe it'll have political implications. Yes.
Not so erudite.
Yeah, I think first thing I have to say is, Dylan, you went after my immutable characteristic of being a Canadian. But more importantly on the topic, the leak is concerning to me because of what the Supreme Court represents specifically. It feels pretty self-evident that the leak is politically motivated, which seems oppositional to what SCOTUS is supposed to be. Now, there can obviously be discussion of has SCOTUS ever actually been apolitical? But it represents, I think, a pretty big shift. And there's good arguments for which side of the politics the leaker could have been. I think that this will potentially be very good for Democrats for voting, hopefully in the midterms. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's a unique precedent that's been set.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Maddie.
Cool. So I feel like I'm kind of losing my mind a little bit when anyone says this leak has ruined the legitimacy of the court. When one justice tried to rape a girl, another is in a literal cult, and yet another harassed women and then helped his wife plan a coup. So, what are we doing here? Oh, and this is the same Supreme Court, by the way, that upheld slavery, supported racial segregation, upheld concentration camps, gutted voting rights, and is now gutting Roe. We shouldn't be that shocked that the court is doing the wrong thing. In fact, I think we should be shocked when the court decides to do the right thing. And yeah, we're just out here stripping people of their civil rights. And I love that the court still found a way to be the real victims here with this leak, right? They're stripping away women's right to bodily autonomy, but they're the victims. And I know there are a few different theories about who leaked it, what side, what possible advantages there could be. And let me tell you, as someone who works in electoral politics, there's not a ton of upside for Democrats because you may think this is a major wedge issue that can drive turnout. But long term, when we're trying to build voting blocks, we're trying to build, we're basically trying to organize people in different battleground districts. This type of thing does not translate to long-term voter loyalty. So there's not a lot of advantage here from that perspective. But yeah, I think it's absurd that we think the court's legitimate or unpoliticized in the first place. And it's the result of there being gridlock in the legislature and us looking to the courts to do the legislating for us, which unfortunately does not codify anything. So there you go.
I'm going to now throw it over to Kay.
So yeah, obviously leaking of anything is going to happen. We're in the day of technology. I think this is going to become more of a common occurrence. I think even like what court cases we're struggling now. Um, as I was joking about earlier, watching the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, there's been a lot of like they had somebody come up to testify and have information that she got from online or to talk to somebody, and like this is a common occurrence. It's going to keep happening the more technology is being used, as much as it is, especially with social media. Um, so I think this being done definitely has a stance on how the vote is actually going to sway, I think, because we've already seen the backlash of it. We've already seen how many people are upset and are causing issues about it. So when that happens, if people are now scared for their lives or scared for what is going to happen to them or their family, I'm sure this is going to have some type of effect on it. I just don't know how to the extent.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Josie Rose.
Yeah, Maddie said a lot about the idea of the leak and how the leak is essentially like the story, right? It's like, oh yeah, like there's this entire loss of bodily autonomy of like half of the U.S. population that's about coming down the line, but we're going to talk about the leak. And I think that sometimes we look at the Supreme Court like we did in our history books when we were in high school, where it's like, oh, the Supreme Court was this, institution that was infallible and wasn't political. And, when you look at a textbook and you look at the theory behind why Supreme Court justices are there for a lifetime, because we don't want this to become political. We have been seeing a dragging of the Supreme Court into a conservative bent for quite a while, right? When we started seeing split decisions all the way up until like the 90s, right? We started seeing more and more split decisions. Back in the past, it was like, no, the Supreme Court's going to agree on everything, right? Because we want to make sure that we're unified on the justices and the law of the land brought forth by the Constitution. But then all of a sudden, the trend started to happen where there started to be more judges that were like going on one side, going on one side, going on one side. And now we have lost our institution, right? Our institution that we used to hold dear to us is no longer that squeaky clean institution, right? So, of course, when you get a political institution, what happens? Leaky leaks, right? Leaks all over the place because it becomes more politicized than the actual opinions that happen. So, this is just a furthering of the consequences of having a politicized court. And we're going to see more of it. We don't know if it came from the Democrats. We don't know where it came from the Republicans, because they both have political narratives to spin because the courts are politicized. So that's really the issue when we start talking about the leak. And people are going to try to point blame and all that stuff. But reality is the Supreme Court has basically lost in this country.
I'm going to throw it over to Fabian.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really have much respect for SCOTUS as an anarchist, obviously. I think it's always been political. And I think the history of the court has always been one that is kind of two steps forward, one step back in terms of giving more power to the state. I mean, that's just kind of how it's designed, which is that if you determine whether or not things are constitutional or unconstitutional, anytime you determine something is constitutional, it invariably takes away the vagueness that something isn't unconstitutional, and then allows and kind of codifies it as something that is. So, I mean, the job of SCOTUS, unfortunately, is one to increasingly grow the authoritarian nature of the United States government over time. I think personally attacking, justices based off of, Democratic talking points and legacy media talking points is, an unfortunate thing that I would hope we could actually talk about the meat and bones instead of, just bullet points that are kind of fucking stupid and are, just half not true. And as well as the leak, I mean, I think we're going to have to look for the investigation to see who did the leak. I mean, it's possible there was hacking, though the way the documents look, it probably wasn't hacked. A lot of people thought it was a MIT. Sotomayor's clerk, it seems to be that, balanced probabilities, it was probably Elizabeth Dutch, Breyer's clerk. But again, circumstantial evidence at best, so we don't really know who leaked it. But it appears to be that it was probably, someone that was very activist minded on the court, that was very upset and wanted to galvanize the left. I don't think that it needs this conspiracy theory that, like, oh, this was done to distract us from the Pfizer dump or the immigration or, the Ukraine war. I think, you don't need a conspiracy theory when like interests align. And when someone is really upset and they want to galvanize, their political party, it's going to get leaked. And as a lot of people have said, as technology increases, those leaks become easier and easier to do.
Aristocracy.
Hey, I first of all, Dylan, I can't really raise my hand, so can I just like shake my body or something to let you know? Instead.
I'm
Is that
sorry. This is the reality. I mean, as a cartoon.
Okay?
We don't.
I
We
know
don't.
you
You know how like McDonald's has like wheelchair ramps. I don't have that for cartoons.
Okay, well, I feel like you should be more inclusive,
Too bad.
and keep that in mind. But anyways,
Ever.
I am gonna shake my body, and you will respond to me when I do that. Okay. Anyways, so I actually think that I'm not an American citizen. So a lot of things that I'm gonna say about this is gonna come from a non-American perspective, but from that non-American perspective, I can tell you that the American legal system is actually unbeknownst to Americans, it's actually one of the most respected legal systems in the entire world. The Amongst like legal scholars around the world, like people look to the United States and the way they do legislation, and the history of how they establish their legal system as something to admire. That doesn't mean it's not flawed, and that doesn't mean there aren't good criticisms of the history of the Supreme Court and all those things. But from a global perspective, it is something that I think Americans deserve to be proud of. But I also think that demonstrates why this whole situation is such a problem. The Americans need to have confidence that the judicial side of their government is impartial, is focused on balanced legislation, and is non-political. It's inherent and very, very important it's very, very, very vital to the balance of the government. If the judicial structure of the government is not impartial, right, and is seen as a political, and even if they are, but if they're seen as a political party, it basically kind of creates a collapse of like the entire structure of of how the American government was organized. So you guys are probably going to need a monarch or something to come in and fix things up, but that was a joke, kind of. Um, the the thing that I would say is that this whole situation has really demonstrated how political the judicial branch has become, unfortunately, and Americans probably should take this really seriously, and it seems like they are. The fact that this is established legislation that is supported by the majority of Americans that just got overturned when it so happened to have just had three court justices appointed by Trump. It's not a coincidence. Everyone knows why. Everyone realizes that the judicial branch has become political, and so yeah, this is something to be taken really seriously. Like you have someone like Justice Roberts, who is basically now like on the fringe, which is crazy because he's not exactly like a left wing dude, but he's now on the fringe of the courts. He's completely lost control, so it's very unfortunate. And I totally understand why Americans are upset and disappointed in this. They have something very special, and they deserve to be upset that the sanctity of it is kind of up in the air.
Okay, so these intro segments are done. Is there anybody that wants to start off the open section? Okay, Maddie?
I'll start. Yeah, so I wanted to add a little bit of color as to why I think we're seeing the Supreme Court become far more politicized. I think it's always been politicized, but a large reason why is because of the gridlock in the legislative branch, because more often we are looking to the judicial branch to essentially legislate on behalf of what we would normally expect to go through the legislature, and that is almost entirely due to the filibuster. The filibuster adds gridlock so that pieces of legislation that would otherwise maybe be controversial just don't get passed or don't get pushed through. And that pushes off that responsibility of legislating these major issues, especially around things like civil rights and civil liberties, to the Supreme Court. And that court was never intended on serving that purpose. They were intended to be a check on the legislative branch. And now all of a sudden, we're asking them to be the deciding body on major pieces of legislation. Same-sex marriage is a perfect example of what that looks like in action. So I think if we want to reduce the amount of politicization that you see in the Supreme Court, the best possible way to do that, at least in the short term, is getting rid of the filibuster.
You know, I agree with you, Maddie, on what you're saying. I think that the Supreme Court really ought to be a more neutral body and ought to stick to what is the law currently, and what is constitutional, and to not sort of legislate from the bench, not extend beyond the law. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think it's frustrating, but I guess we'll get into it in the next, few topics. But yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to, is obviously, because you always hear, well, this one's going to be a conservative judge, this one's going to be a liberal judge, and it really shouldn't be that, because yes, the Supreme Court they're supposed to just take laws, not make laws, but take laws and weigh them against the Constitution, and is this constitutional or not? They're not supposed to be making laws, but as far as the leak goes, like, I don't know what the intent. Maybe the intention is to hopefully sway public opinion and have the court of public opinion change whatever the courts are going to decide. I don't think that would ever happen with the Supreme Court. I would hope it doesn't happen with the Supreme Court. But either way, having that level get a leak out, that's dangerous. That sets a dangerous precedence. That should be like
We've
guarded
had this
materials.
happen before. It happened with Roe v. Wade, actually.
Right. Oh yeah, no, this isn't the first time it's happened. It's fortunately with this level, it's very rare, but it shouldn't be at all. Like, I don't know. To me, if you're gonna have a position where you're doing anything in the courts like that, you should have the brains enough to keep everything confidential and let the system play the way it's supposed to go. But unfortunately, and left and right, you have activists on both sides, and they'll do what they got to do to get their party ahead one way or another. It's left and right
Maddie,
doing it. So.
Maddie, can I ask you like what you mean by, because maybe more details, because you say that the filibuster is an issue, and then you talk about the politicization of the Supreme Court as if it's a kind of like a recent thing, and yet the filibuster has been an issue on and off since the 1860s, and Roe v. Wade was known as being like one of the worst instances of legislating from the branch.
Oh yeah,
even Ruth Bader Ginsburg admitted this, and this is 73. So like, what do you mean like by saying are you saying the filibuster since the 1860s has been a stain on the entirety of our government for the past 200, like how long, like what do you mean?
So actually you can look at thank you. Well, I'll make it make sense. So you can actually look at the numbers in this case for how the use of the filibuster has evolved over time and what that has meant in terms of the Supreme Court docket. So yes, back in the 60s, that was actually the first time where you saw the filibuster truly weaponized, similarly to how it is in modern day with the Civil Rights Act. So you had a senator stand on the floor and talk for over 24 hours trying to block the Civil Rights Act. And then eventually it was able to be pushed through. But that was kind of the first time that it was weaponized to that degree in order to block a piece of legislation that could be considered somewhat controversial. And usually it has to do with bills that are concerning civil rights. What we're seeing now is that the use of the filibuster, and I can send over, I actually did a stream on this a little over a year ago, and the amount of times that the filibuster has either been implemented or threatened to be used has increased exponentially, and it has gone up especially high under the watch of Mitch McConnell. So rather than being used as a way to engage in just further discussion, getting more people to weigh in on the legislation, it's more so just been used as a blocker. Now, that is directly correlated with an increase in the number of cases being proposed on the Supreme Court docket. So when you look at just how many cases were presented to the Supreme Court every year, back in the 50s and 60s, it was a lot lower because so much more went through the legislature. Whereas now what we're seeing, especially with this exponential use of the filibuster simply as a blocking mechanism, the amount that is being put on the docket for the Supreme Court is that is directly correlated. So that's why I'm saying, because I agree with you. I think it's foolish to think that, the Supreme Court has never been politicized and now all of a sudden it's our great institutions being tarnished. It's like, no. That certainly is not the case. However, what we're seeing now is that politicization is being weaponized in a different way because they're being asked to legislate basically on behalf of the legislature. And when you're asking people with lifetime appointments to make those kinds of decisions, that is troubling. And then when you see just how much more is on their plate now versus 50, 60 years ago, yeah, it's fucking concerning. And that, again, is in direct correlation with the number of times the filibuster has either been threatened to be used to stall legislation or actually used and they were not able to reach a cloiture vote.
Yeah. So again, I'm gonna respond real quick. I'll keep it quick. There's a ton of things wrong with your argument. There is. So number one, your issue. Pause. Your issue here is with the procedural filibuster, right? Possibly, and the fact that the filibuster has changed in its implementation, and that's a decent argument. Obviously, anyone that's taken any class in college knows that correlation is not causation, right? It could just as easily be that
I have an economics master's degree. I know.
Okay. Yeah. Well, apparently you're not using it. So you could also
not right now. I'm listening to a moron.
Yeah, so you could also just as easily talk about the fact that the complexity of laws have changed. You could also talk about the fact that the culture of political extremism and the division has grown, and that could be more of a cause. You could also simply say that the state has become more authoritarian in its measures, and so therefore there has to be more constitutional challenges brought to the court. There are a ton of other things that you could say, and instead what you're giving is this surface level analysis and then tying it with DNC talking points, and I think it needs to be exposed.
I feel like I
work for the DNC, and those talking points are not located anywhere in DNC talking points, but pop off.
Got it.
I feel like we could acknowledge that the filibuster is one component in this, and I think we could also acknowledge that there has been increased political polarization. Democrats have moved left, Republicans have moved right on some things and left on other things, and the country and the political system is deeply divided on many issues, and that makes it in of itself also difficult to pass legislation through Congress. So obviously there's a number of factors that we can identify, and I agree that they collectively point to an increased politicalization of the Supreme Court. In addition to that, a lot of people have intense vested interest in the outcomes of American policy. People globally have vested interest. And so the incentive to influence the American political system by any means possible, just increases year after year. So people are going to find whatever way they can to, work the system and get their preferred policy outcome.
I also just want to reiterate how normal it is that Roe v. Wade legalized abortion. People seem to think that that's a strange thing that a court case did that. It's totally normal for court cases to set legal precedents and that to form into law. And I think that's a healthy way to do law. Almost all cases, almost all legislation that's happened around the world in the West, in the Western world, that's legalized or decriminalized abortion actually happened through landmark court cases like Roe v. Wade. We had our own in Canada as well. So it's not something abnormal, and I don't think that that itself is a good criticism of the case or a good argument for the need to actually like legislate it itself. The issue seems to be specifically with the judicial system and how you guys put court judges and all pick court judges and all of that but yeah, I don't know how it connects to the filibuster, but I don't know why you guys have filibuster. It's weird as
Roe
hell.
v. Wade is another topic, though, but I mean, we can get into that. But there are a number of issues with Roe v. Wade itself.
Sure, but the idea of the concept of like just not even analyzing the case itself, but the idea that a case legalized abortion, that is not weird. That is not like strange.
That's not what
in and
that's
of
not what
itself.
people are talking about, right? And again, this bleeds into another topic, right? But they're when they say legalization, right? They're not or like legislating from the bench. They're not talking about saying something is now the law. What they're talking about is the details, right? Roe v. Wade and also Pennsylvania Planned Parenthood v. Casey, right? It set up things that are designed to be done by the legislative. And even Ruth Bader Ginsburg admits that these are issues, and that's why she wanted Strusk to be the case and not Roe v. Wade. But like I said, we can get into those details later.
The other thing is that it wouldn't necessarily be unusual for a court to make this kind of decision that has legal implications. That's the purpose of a Supreme Court. What makes it unusual is the circumstances in which Roe v. Wade was, decided on by the court, and the relative unprecedence in common law and a variety of other factors, how it relates to the Constitution, that make it seem more like a political action.
Yeah, and what the difference too is that while the courts can make a certain decision and then that law goes into effect, so same-sex marriage is a perfect example, where as soon as that decision came down, same-sex marriage was legalized in all the states. The problem, though, when you don't have anything that goes through the legislature and then is signed into law, is that those protections aren't codified. So you're really operating with the understanding that should that be held as precedent, that those protections and rights and whatever are going to be given to all Americans. The problem is, as we're seeing with this, is that those decisions can be overturned. That precedent can be overturned. It's rare, but it can happen. So without something going through the formal legislative process where they have those protections signed into federal law, that kind of leaves an opening for the potential of the decision to be reversed. So that's what
that makes no sense.
So wait,
perfect sense.
It makes no sense. Like legislation should be overruled too.
I thought the topic.
Wait.
Want me to explain?
Okay,
how government works.
There's multiple people talking at the same time, so I'm gonna go in order. Preacher hasn't spoken much. Preacher was gonna, I think, object. I see Josie, so it's Preacher, Fabian, and Josie. So I'm probably gonna go in that order because Josie, did you want to back Maddie up, or did you want to?
I just wanted to say that Fabian Liberty keeps on saying that our Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't like Roe. It wasn't that she didn't like Roe. It was that she didn't like the strength of the decision of a right to privacy decision and the undue burden that was stated by the court. She felt that Roe v. Wade could have been ruled stronger, but the precedent wasn't strong enough by the way it was written. So you can't just throw around our rage quit. Okay, we're good. All right. I guess that's it. All right. So my point stands, Josie W. We're good.
Okay. Preacher?
Yeah, I just maybe I missed something, but we seem to be on to a whole different topic. I thought the topic was on the leak itself. And I mean, I thought we were going to be talking about the leak in the first topic and whether this is a good or bad thing. We seem to already be on to the second topic. I'm confused here.
There's only so much I think we can get from this.
Okay, so we're on the topic.
I think it's turned.
Sorry
into
about that.
Like
My Discord decided to update randomly.
Can I just respond to what Josie said really quickly?
Sure.
I do think that maybe it's useful to be specific in our language here, because Ginsburg wasn't happy with Roe v. Wade. What she was happy with was abortion access and rights. So I think you're right in saying that she wanted those protections to be stronger. but her argumentation for, getting those stronger rights would be either legislating differently, so like she wanted it through equal protections of like sex-based discrimination, or legislating it incrementally through like states or Congress. And she had the opinion that Roe v. Wade itself was not law done very well, and also had a high chance of being, overturned, and that was her fear. So
she also feared that all of the elements that were necessary to establish abortion as a right were not present in the Roe v. Wade case.
Yeah.
And that's why she wanted Strusk to go forward, because this was a woman in Vietnam that was being denied like actual rights because of whether or not she wanted an abortion. And so it had like the religious element, it had like the actual denial of rights that were afforded, which would allow it to be more strongly linked to like gender discrimination and things of that. And it wouldn't have been such a stretch, and it wouldn't have been a controversial opinion.
And the only reason I bring this up is because we'll get into later, like the distinction, because I think you can make an argument that Roe v. Wade is not law done very well, but that abortion is maybe something that's good to have, access to. And I think that's really what Ruth Bader Ginsburg's opinion is.
Right, but Fabian, let's say it did go the Struss decision, and then all of a sudden, would you be like in favor, or would you be outraged if they overruled that too?
Who said I'm outraged?
I'm just asking if you are.
Like, I'm evictionist. I'm not pro-life. Like, I believe women should be able, until the date of birth, to be able to evict a baby. The only thing I'm against is dismemberment of the body. Like, I'm essentially pro-choice. Like, are you just assuming like right wing or bad?
No,
like,
I was just curious because you're talking about how poorly written Roe v. Wade was, and you were
it's poorly
saying,
written.
hey, there was a better alternative. So I was just trying to make sure there was a logical consistency there. I was just asking. Don't get offended. Don't get offended. I don't know you.
I could be wrong, but
on one panel with you.
It could be wrong, but I actually feel like I see Fabian's argument and Maddie's somewhat connected, right? Where like if filibusters weren't happening to like politically wedge and like stall legislation, for example, like the Supreme Court coming in and weighing in on this rule, like it would have been better probably through other institutions like the Congress to go through. But because of processes like filibuster, as Maddie's outlined, it's led to basically being opted into the Supreme Court, which led to the Roe v. Wade situation. And the Roe v. Wade, like privacy is kind of a weird one. The key of this overturning is that Casey went through Roe v. Wade and did all of the like precedential work and like looked through the history and all the traditions. And they're like, yes, Roe v. Wade was like kind of a historical uniqueness, but we support it. So like Roe v. Wade by itself, you can maybe quibble of like, oh, it's a little weird, but Casey behind Roe v. Wade, I find a hard time quibbling too much over Roe v. Wade because Casey came out in support of it.
Okay. I wanted
going back to the topic. Are you done with the topic, or are we talking about the leak in particular?
Yeah,
because the leak is kind of a distraction from the meat and potatoes of what's going on.
Is my mic working? Yeah. 1 second. Is my mic working or is it low? I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Now it's working.
Okay, fantastic. Kay, earlier I know you tried to butt in a few times. Is there anything you wanted to say before we probably move on to the next topic? Because it seems like people have
I think we've gone way past of it. I think we've gone straight into like judicial and stuff. It was more past the leak idea of it. When Preacher was talking about how like it doesn't happen very often, but I was going to comment like, do you think it's going to happen more with the way social media is? Do you think like in the environment that we are in, do you think stuff like this is going to continue to happen more? And do you think it's beneficial for us to know some of these things rather than keep it hidden away or not?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Did you ask the question?
Yeah, I was talking to Preacher.
Okay, got you.
Oh yeah, I'll say I do believe it's going to happen more because of social media, because of just internet in general. I mean, it's not like it wasn't going to be kept secret from us. That was just the first draft that was leaked.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to release their decision eventually. Someone was saying, I forget who I was listening to, said before they go on their summer hiatus, they were going to release it anyway. They might as well just release it now. And I think that all things should be done in due time. So I think, does the leak really hurt a whole lot? Not really. I just think it's more of a slap in the face to the institution, to be honest with you. But I do think, yes, with technology being the way it is, yeah, I think it's going to be. We're going to see a whole lot of kinds of leaks happening much more often.
I think there's something that is like people are really not understanding about when cases come out, right? When writ of certs come out and a majority opinion is put out, there's also a dissent. right? And the fact that we have a draft of the majority opinion, right, without a dissent, and especially with Roe v. Wade, it wouldn't surprise me if there are multiple dissents. I wouldn't surprise me if like Sotomayor is writing her own dissenting opinion, Breyers is writing his own dissent. It wouldn't surprise me if like we don't know if it's a 6-3 decision or if it's a 5-4, right? And if it's a 6-3 decision, that could be really interesting. But if it's a 5-4 decision, we might end up with 3 opinions from the court. And the problem with that is that when a justice writes something, even when it is a dissenting opinion, it is still something that is referenced in lower courts, right? And so because we have a draft of a majority opinion that may be harsher than what the actual end will look like, right? And may have additional information. So part of that is an issue, because this could just be like, this is what I'm thinking. Now let's argue about this and critique this and have something a little bit differently. But also because we don't have that paired dropping at the exact same time with the dissents, what you're having is the most extreme view as far as the left is concerned, which is the overturning, and you're not having the opinions of the dissent that can be used in the lower courts as a means to retry abortion rights at the federal level, right? Because the idea that overturning Roe v. Wade just means, oh, well, this went back to the states and that's all done, right? No, like Roe v. Wade is being overturned because it's a shit case, right? And Casey's a shit case, and they're not done very well. And what is going to happen instead is that this opinion is going to come out, and then it's certain laws that, like in Louisiana, we're already seeing like charging women with murder for like abortions after 4 fucking weeks because the Republicans decided they just wanted to go off their fucking rocker because they got the fucking nightmare fuel to go do that. And so it's really important to understand that leaking one draft is a big problem because it doesn't come with dissent, and it doesn't come with the other justices' opinions, and it doesn't give us a full view of the opinion of the court and how that might actually be legislated and what the avenues are. And instead, we're writing legislation based off of fear-mongering of Roe v. Wade going away.
Baby,
Yeah, it doesn't
I think
matter. Let me just say, like, you may have the dissenting opinion, but like those, you can't use those as precedent in the same way that the majority opinion is held. No one was able to deny same-sex marriage because like Scalia wrote like a scathing dissent opinion to it. Like, I'm sorry, that's fucking
not true.
wrong.
You're
No, it is true.
wrong.
Oh, it is true.
You don't.
I don't fucking care how much you think that Roe is like a shit case. Like, oh, it's just my bodily autonomy. So like when the outcome is that, when the outcome is hinging on you like agonizing over like, well, the specifics of the case weren't great. It's like, how, like, fuck you, dude. How dare you?
Wait. Okay, so we're no longer talking about the first topic. The first topic is dead in the water. I don't even. We're already into the second topic. Do people want outros, or should we just go on the second topic? I think second topic.
Can I at least respond?
Okay.
To someone saying, fuck you, how dare you?
Well, Fabian, yes. But did you want to bring that back into the first topic, or should we just make it the second topic? I think we should just make it the second topic.
So long as I can get a quick response,
Okay,
I'll move on.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm pretty sure I care about body autonomy more than you do. First and foremost. There's no way that someone that's a statist cares about body autonomy more than I do. I'm an evictionist. Second of all, you're dead wrong. Assertive denials and dissenting opinions are used not as precedent, but as opinions all of the time in lower courts. And if you say that that's not true, like, you just don't know what you're talking about. It is like assertive denials.
Then why have a Supreme Court if they can just issue 2 decisions and then they can kind of pick and choose? Why bother voting then, Fabian?
Because it's very.
I don't understand.
I get it. You don't understand the legal system.
That's stupid. Why would they not need to?
It's not stupid. You just don't understand the legal system. It's very common that things get challenged. Okay. It's very common that things get challenged in the lower court, or that there are gray areas. And what people will do is they will bring up assertive denials, and they will bring
an example.
Oh my God.
Name an example that's ever happened. Because I'm sorry.
So in California, there are cases on the docket where individuals are arguing the assertive denial from Justice Thomas on Section 230 reform. This is an example.
And has that gone through? Has it actually been used? Has it actually led to any sort of legislation? Get to the point, bud.
I am getting to the point. You're just trying to yell over top of me because you're fucking wrong.
Let's go.
It occurs all of the time that people use assertive denials and people use dissenting opinions when there are gray areas to say, hey, look, the Supreme Court has this type of an opinion based off of this specific matter. And this adds to my case. It adds to the legitimacy. It doesn't necessarily need to be legal precedent for them to use it in lower courts. And it is important when a leak occurs and only a draft of the majority opinion is out that it's an issue that the dissent is not there. Otherwise, why the fuck would the dissent be there?
So how is that ever overturned like a major law? Sorry, I know we're going to the next topic, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, that's all very nice, but until that it goes through the entire legal process, women are still going to die from not having access to abortion. Like, someone may be able to think that that strengthens their legal argument. They may think like, oh, okay, because there's this like massive, very important opinion from a Supreme Court justice that somehow that bolsters their challenge to that law. But the reality is, like, that doesn't actually mean that then they can go have autonomy over their own body. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden then they can get those civil rights back. Like, that just isn't how it fucking works. And to think that like, oh, don't worry, because there'll be a dissenting opinion. Like, what a fucking racket. Anyways, let's move on to the next topic.
You're being insane.
Let's move on to the next topic.
You're getting into emotional arguments instead of talking about what I'm actually talking about.
I think Fabian is just saying that, like, when the dissenting opinion comes out, there will be some state level courts that look at that. And when they're drafting their federal or their state opinion on the legality of abortion, they will use that dissent and the argumentation within it to allow people access to abortion. Right.
But that's not how it's going to work. Like in reality, like that may be something that they add as part of their overall arguments in the legal challenges that are going to come from whatever decision this is made. But when you look at how people's when you think about how people are going to be affected by this decision, just because there's a dissent that argues from the perspective that maybe a lot of us share, that isn't going to mean shit when it comes to women trying to get abortions. Yeah, they might challenge it in court. Yeah, that might be something that they cite in those challenges. But when we think about, well, is that going to do shit to help women get abortions, especially in red states? No, the fuck it's not.
I want to say
it
this.
Matters. It matters.
Fabian,
dissenting opinions matter.
Let me say something really quickly here. So let's say you're in Alabama. Let's say you're in Alabama and we get a federal court and they're like, you know what, this goes above the law. We were talking about Louisiana. We're calling it murder now, right? And they use that dissenting opinion to try to uphold and put a stay on that type of work until what happens? It goes back to the Supreme Court. And what does the Supreme Court do? They will lay on top of their precedent. That's what will happen, Fabian. So like they can use those opinions all day, but it's still not the majority opinion of the court. And especially if it's a 6-3, 5-4 as well, the majority court is not going to overrule the ruling a year after they just overruled it. Like,
of course, they're not going to take the case in the docket, and it's probably going to be stare decisis even if they did. But what I'm talking about, right, is that this is moving it over to the legislator. There's no reason that the federal government can't legislate some form of things. And when you have a leak, you have a draft that isn't necessarily the opinion of the court, number one. And number two, you don't have the dissenting opinion. And the dissenting opinion often gives views that either bolster or change what the other opinion is. They give avenues that say, like, look, you can challenge this if you do it this way. You can legislate it so long as you do it this way. These are the issues. Or they can say, like, yes, this was overturned, but this doesn't mean that abortion isn't a right. It just means that the way that this case isn't an appropriate thing. Like, there are a ton of different ways that a dissenting opinion can be used to inform the legislator.
Final, right? Is that what you're like? Essentially, this is not the final decision by the court.
It's half of the opinion, and it's a draft of half of the opinion, and that causes more damage than if we had all of the opinions together and that they were cleaned up. And that's the only argument I'm making. And then people are going about like emotional arguments about like women will die. None of this matters.
They will.
Like, okay, why are you debating? Why are you debating the fucking emotional, topic? So like hysterical that women will fucking die because this is overturned, and we aren't supposed to feel good because there's going to be a dissenting opinion.
It's just talking.
Okay, Fabian. Oh, it's not the topic that this decision, this as it's written, this draft, even if they water it down a bit, the fact that the outcome, the material outcome of that decision is that abortion will be illegal in many states. That is the outcome. Sure, you have some dissenting opinions, which I will admit they are important in that they can be referenced when shaping cases and finding ways to legislate around that. That is clear. But
literally don't
to
even know
think
that.
no, I'm not
You
done.
literally don't
but
even
to
know
think
that.
you literally need to shut the fuck up right now, please. So like
you're just saying
what you
wrong
need,
shit.
what you need. Thank you, Fabian. You've had your time. So like what I'm saying is that to think that the outcome, because we're supposed to feel better that there's a dissenting opinion that can be referenced when the outcome of the overall decision
Nobody told
is
you
that
to feel
abortion.
better.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Shut the fuck
I
up,
talked
dude.
about facts, and you're
Okay.
just
Why
don't you,
ranting
like,
about emotion.
Oh,
Okay,
just
we need to
getting
stop.
off
We
that.
need to
Can
stop.
we
We
go
need
to
to stop this for a
aristocracy?
second. Okay, we need to stop for a
What a
second.
rational daddy.
Okay.
Thank you, Tough Dad.
Okay. So
It's
there
like
was.
angry and
Okay.
Eris is wiggly.
Okay. Wait. Okay. So we didn't have opening statements for everybody on this topic because we just kind of slid into it because nobody wanted to talk about the first topic. It seemed like really in detail. So I think we're going to do opening statements because this is getting really heated and I want people to give it just a chance to cool down. Okay. So we're going to start from the bottom and go to the left all the way because I see a lot of people want to talk about this. So we're going to start with not so erudite opening statements for this.
Sure. I'm hearing a lot of like
be
talking
clear,
past you.
the topic now is Roe v. Wade being overturned. Now we're actually talking about it being overturned.
Right. So this is exactly what I was worried about, is that fundamentally I mostly agree with Maddie, but when we get into like moral grandstanding over a topic, we don't come to good solutions, right? And so like there was a big issue when I was listening to Maddie and Fabian going at each other, and that like Fabian's talking about like the nuance of like dissent and like how it can be useful. Because for example, like we all know, I agree with you, Maddie, this is going to be an overturn. There is going to be a lack of federal protection, which means everyone who is pro-choice needs to start being motivated of like, how the fuck do we fix this now? And the dissenting opinion is going to be valuable to forming some of the arguments. I know that I don't even know if she's listening at this point. The issue is that when we morally grandstand and we get into this stuff, we actually ruin the conversation when it's like, I'm at least on the pro-choice side of saying like, this shit's going to happen. We're fucked. The overturning is going to happen. How do we get women's access to abortion now? What do we do? What are our next steps? Because I think that's going to be what's most helpful to women rather than just like morally grandstanding about like how awful this is. It is fucking awful, but we need to now like get into like the actual solutions to this.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Preacher.
Yeah, Roe versus Wade being overturned, being kicked back to the states. I know Fabian earlier had mentioned the Louisiana bill, and women being charged with murder for after 4 months of pregnancy. But then on the opposite side of that, you have California, which they're about to look at legislation that says even up to a week after the child is born, if the mother decides she doesn't want it, she can leave it in the other room, totally neglect it, let it die, and the medical examiner is not allowed to put cause of death on that. So
Where? What bill? Let me. I need to look at that one. That's a big
opening statements.
Oh, sorry. I just need to know the bill.
Okay, opening statements, Preacher.
So either way, you're looking at it, there's going to be extremes. There's going to be, but this is the way it's designed for states to make their decisions. This isn't something for the federal government to cover. This is up to each state. And you know what? If anything, as I'm sorry, I forgot her name. The woman next to me, as she was saying, maybe this will get people to start actually paying attention to local politics, because that's what it's going to come down to. Pay attention to local politics, because now you want to know who you're voting into office. Obviously, me as a conservative, I'm for this, and I'm for the overturning. Listen, I used to be one who would concede a little bit of ground and say, okay, well, let's go with the heartbeat bill. But the last time I was on one of these panels and this subject was on there, no, there's no concession. We don't want any kind of bill stopping any kind of abortion. So it went from being something that was rare and safe to anytime, anyone, and it's just now it's up to and even after birth. It's gotten insane. So yeah, I'm pro it being overturned and kicked back to states, and you're gonna have some states that are saying, you know what, nix abortion. Other states are saying, do it all you want. New York and California off the top of my head. So, I mean, it's just being kicked back to states. It's no big deal.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Taft.
Great. Yeah, I think that the argument against Roe v. Wade on the basis of constitutionality is pretty strong. Roe v. Wade relied on an understanding of the 14th Amendment, which was pretty removed, 2 levels abstracted from the original text, as well as, and we see this in Alito's opinion, that it relied on a misunderstanding and a misapplication of common law and a misunderstanding of the history and opinions leading up to that 14th Amendment. So the idea that like we can stretch bodily autonomy and access to abortion from that 14th Amendment is pretty weak on a constitutional ground. And then when we go into Casey, I also think that like the arguments for this is a little weaker. I guess this isn't the topic, so maybe we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I think that like if you're going to argue for abortion rights, I think that we should also maybe be serious about the weakness of Roe v. Wade as constitutional law.
Okay, next is going to be Josie.
Okay, first I have to just push back immediately on the misinformation that there's a California bill saying that they are going to allow mothers to kill their children 7 days after birth. That is completely wrong and not even incorrect. It's a bill that was introduced to protect women who had pregnancy-related births that were giving birth to stillborns, and there was radicals out there that were actually persecuting them for killing their children. It is a protection bill to protect mothers from the health of their babies and how their pregnancy is going, because things can happen. Okay, so it's actually a protection of women. It's not what you say it is, and it's disgusting that you would go to that length to try to say, oh, look what California is doing. Okay, I hate that. I hate that. Okay, anyways, that made me a little hot. So going on to this decision about what is happening right now, about the fact that we are losing abortion access in a lot of the red states in this country. You already see it with Louisiana. It is already happening. The fact of the matter is, what we need to do is to make sure that we win in these next elections so we can actually start legislating things. And that includes changing rules to the filibuster so it's not an administrative block and an actual like and stop doing it and letting majority actually rule in this country. Like, we need to get back to that. We need to allow us to be able to legislate for things that are extremely popular. And these tools have been used over and over and over. And when you take a look at the Trump appointed judges, every single one of them lied through their teeth in front of the Senate confirmation hearings about that they were not going to overturn this decision because it was settled law. Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, as well as Gorsuch. Those three but all said that they were not going to do this, and those three are all on the names on this decision. It is showing that this entire Supreme Court situation has gone so out of hand that judges are being picked for political stances and are able to just lie to our Senate with no recourse or repercussions. There should be something. There needs to be some checks and balances on the judicial system. The checks and balances should go the other way as well. And I think that there are some really egregious things going on how these judges are being appointed and how they're being selected and their qualifications. So I think that this is going to hurt a lot of people, and we can get into the nuances of that as we speak further.
Okay, next is going to be Kay.
I think the big thing is it's not that like taking this away is automatically legalizing it. It's going now more to the state level. And I think a lot of people, yes, there's a lot of these big crazy state things that are happening, but I think we need to take into consideration, you talked about voting, we talked about this and that, like then do those things within your state and figure out what is the actual regulations that we want to put on these, because there clearly needs to be some type of regulation. I know personally I've heard a lot of stories and looking at data, the ones like I'm clearly more pro-life and I'm very open to the idea that there needs to be strict regulations on it. The idea of abortion happening for victims of rape and pregnancies from incest and stuff like that is 1%. Like, these numbers are so minuscule compared to the amount of abortions that occur in the world for reasons of, I can't afford a baby right now. I'm having relationship issues. Like, it's going to dramatically change my life. Like, yeah, that's going to fucking happen. That's what a kid does. Like, you know your actions when you went to go have sex. Like, there's a birth control, there's a plan B, there's condoms. There's so many other things that you can do to protect yourself in these situations. And yes, there's medical conditions that occur from in the womb, whether it be for the child or the mother, which those are completely different circumstances that need to be taken at a case by case basis, and not from a, hey, let's just legalize it for everyone and let us kill any fetus up until the time they get out of the womb. Like, that's not okay.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Maddie.
Yeah, so I'm going to be upfront from the very beginning. I've had 2 abortions. I've had 2 abortions, and it's because at those times I was not ready to be a mother, and I was not in a position where I could give the child the life it deserved. And now that I'm planning to start a family with my fiance in the next couple of years, when we eventually do start a family, I have been able to build the kind of life and have a foundation where when we start a family, I can give those children the love and support they deserve. And the only reason I'm in a position to do that is because I wasn't forced to carry a birth to term and have a baby before I was ready. And to think that that can always be prevented with contraception, in both cases, used condoms. That's why they're 99% effective, not 100. And here's the thing about the Scottish decision. When they overturn Roe in June and allow states to ban the procedure, it's going to cause a massive mess for healthcare, for interstate travel, for criminal law, and for privacy rights. Forced birth in a country with the highest maternal mortality rate, no paid family leave, no universal subsidized childcare, no continued birth parent care, and frequently inaccessible healthcare, that is a new level of monstrous. Is there any condition that's more essential to democracy than a person's control over their own body? Can we call ourselves a free country without it when we deny that to more than half of our citizens? The abortion debate just feels so repetitive and circular because, quote, it'll hurt women, women will die, because it's not about the actual interests of actual abortion patients. The whole fundamental question at issue is much more remedial about whether women are citizens at all, whether we deserve bodily autonomy. And it's sort of disgusting that we're being talked about as if we don't. In America, if this passes, a corpse will have more rights to its bodily autonomy than people with uteruses. Because you can't force someone to be an organ donor, even if them donating an organ will save a life. Can't force them. They can have no good reason to. They can have any reason they want. They can just be like, no, I don't want to donate a kidney to that person. He sucks. And they're fine. And like, it's fine. They're not obligated to do that. And yet we're asking people with uteruses to carry a child to term without universal health care. So that costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. It's a dangerous medical procedure. So we're asking them to go through that because we care about the sanctity of life. We care about the health of that baby. If you care about the health of that baby, why don't you fight tooth and nail for free prenatal health care for every pregnant woman to ensure that every child that is born in this country is able to thrive and be healthy? What about paid free school lunch? What about universal childcare? What about universal family leave? Like, do you realize that it's illegal to separate puppies from their moms before, I think it's like 8 weeks, because they say separating them before then is inhumane? Yet we have no guaranteed paid family leave for women who have given birth? I don't think so. So yeah, I just think my heart is breaking for the people with uteruses in America who are going to have to live in a world where they have fewer rights to their own bodily autonomy than a fucking corpse.
Yep. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Eris.
Holy shit, that was a hell of a speech from Maddie. I totally understand why it seems like Maddie's attitude might seem like emotional, and I understand, like, Fabian, why you wanted to talk about like theory. But the truth is that uh, this issue, it's hard not to be emotional about it when you're affected by it. And I totally understand your frustration. Like, you want to talk about the facts and logic and all that kind of stuff. But again, from like a female perspective and a perspective of people who can get pregnant, you this the entire idea is, it feels, is being fertilized against your will. It sounds like something from like a sci-fi dystopia, and yet it seems to be something that's like normalized or like somewhat accepted in the United States. In other developed areas in the world, here in Canada, even our most conservative populations don't regard it as a legislation issue, right? They might want to reduce abortions, but they don't see it as like something that you criminalize a woman for. That's it's very extreme, and the fact that that's seen as a criminal issue is very frustrating, and it's hard not to get emotional about it. So I would ask for people who are watching this to at least like have some empathy and understanding on why on why this is so scary, and why it's hard to not just discuss like, oh, like let's just like open this book and discuss the theory like without any emotions. It's very challenging to do that unless we're like Data from Star Trek, when it so directly involves our bodies and our lives. That's one thing. And there's also like something that I've noticed that's just totally absent from the American discussion is just how much it's focused on criminalization. The answer, if conservatives want to reduce abortions, which I think conservatives around the world do want to reduce abortions in general, but conservatives in Canada, when they focus on reducing abortions, it's not through legislation. They do it through either like the Medical Ethics Board, or they do it through like trying to enable mothers to choose life. And it seems very strange to me that the answer from an American pro-life perspective is always like, let's criminalize the woman. In Canada instead, we say like, we actually have zero criminal legislation when it comes to abortion. In theory, in Canada, you can literally be like 9 months pregnant and technically abort your child and not be a criminal. And I know that sounds totally crazy. The thing is, it never happens here. No one actually aborts their children at that time. Instead, we leave it to medical ethics. So doctors have all these specific rules according to medical ethics boards and all this on when they're supposed to conduct abortions, when it's okay to, when it's not okay to, and all that stuff. And it's just seen as a medical issue. It's not seen as this criminal one. And I think it just gives, like, you guys should take a little pause and think, like, why are we so obsessed with making this a criminal issue? And maybe there's a little bit of misogyny that is underlying that. Just something to think about.
Fabian?
Yeah, so I'd actually like to talk about the topic. We hear a lot of people not talking about the topic and just kind of spewing bullshit. And I never thought that I would actually have to do this. But I guess, broken clock is right twice a day. I'm just going to quote our lovable quote that I think everyone knows who said it. Facts don't care about your fucking feelings. I changed it a little bit. First of all, Amy Coney Barrett didn't fucking say that she wasn't going to overturn Roe v. Wade. That's just more misinformation. She specifically said that she believed in stare decisis, but that she thought that it was not settled law, and that the fact that there have been so many cases shows that it's not settled law, and that there was issues with Roe v. Wade. She kept her opinion on like saying like, I totally overturn it kind of to herself, but that's pretty typical of Supreme Court SCOTUS appointees in the Senate, especially if they've ever worked on a case. If there's any ongoing things on the docket, they tend not to like talk about them that much, and they tend to be evasive, and of course Republicans will do it when they, will yell about the Democrats, like when Jackson is like not answering certain things. They're like, see, she's dishonest. And then Democrats do it when it's a conservative representative, but at the end of the day, it's kind of just what SCOTUS people do in Senate confirmation hearings. In terms of us talking about the filibuster again, this is a total non sequitur. It has no relevance on this. If you're not able to come to an agreement on abortion legislation unless you can get rid of the filibuster, then you're not creating legislation that isn't simply going to be overturned the next time the Senate is taken by the opposing party. It's not a compromise. Like, that's how legislation and democracy works. You guys, I love that the left tends to love democracy until democracy goes against whatever it is their opinion. Then all of a sudden, we have to make the system less democratic. Again, talking about abortion in this case is not what we're talking about. We're talking about whether or not Roe v. Wade should be overturned. Roe v. Wade being overturned does not criminalize abortion in any way, shape, or form. That is just a complete falsity. What it does is it does allow certain states to do that, and it allows additional challenges to go to the court and for the legislator to be able to determine like what are the appropriate lines and what aren't the appropriate lines. What it is I know you guys are going to hate to hear it again, it's democracy. And I'm the one that's not a fan of democracy, not you guys. So like, again, like I want to talk about the actual Roe v. Wade. I don't want to talk about just emotional arguments around abortion and then pretending like everyone that doesn't agree with you exactly is somehow a pro-life nut job crazy person because they happen to disagree, or somebody like me that's not fucking pro-life. I'm an evictionist. So, I mean, hopefully we can spin this conversation into something that actually makes fucking sense instead of rantings about like they're coming for me and it's the end of the world, and we can actually talk about the fucking topic.
Okay, can I jump in and say like 2 things right away? Number 1, I'll raise you a new quote. Facts don't care about your feelings, but more importantly, people don't care about your facts unless you care a little about their feelings, okay? And so when I brought up feelings specifically, there's power to bringing feelings and emotions and human experience into these conversations, right? When Maddie shared about her experience with abortions and how it has overall improved her life, that is a good utilization of emotions in a debate. The problem when emotions are an issue is when you try to weaponize them and bludgeon them against people who disagree with you. That becomes an issue because when you weaponize feelings in a debate, it typically causes the opposing side to resent you, not be more warm to your position. So you have to be smart about how you use feelings, just like you have to be smart about how you use facts, but both are important, particularly in a topic that deeply impacts specific individuals' lives the most, that being people with a uterus.
Let me be more specific. Plenty of people have talked about rhetoric and how pathos, ethos, and logos need to be connected to each other. And if you just make a logos-based argument, people aren't going to follow you because there isn't an emotional appeal there. There isn't a narrative. But when you make emotional arguments that are non sequiturs, that are not attached to the discussion in any way, shape, or form, and your entire argument is pathos, you look like a crazy person.
And then when you hold on one second. I just want to say this really quickly, Fabian. So if you focus only on logos and you say that repealing Roe v. Wade doesn't automatically trigger, then there are 13 states that have post-Roe laws that ban nearly all abortions that would be triggered as soon as Roe is overturned.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And 9 states retained their unenforced pre-abortion bans as well. So as soon as Roe v. Wade is gone and it doesn't restrict them from being able to enforce in the way they are. So right off the bat, right there are 22 states. The second that this case becomes the law of the land, we'll have it immediately the next day. So what you say is wrong.
You think
wait. I can't hear anything. Okay. So that was directed towards Fabian. So Fabian should have some time to respond. I have Maddie, Preacher, and Taft all on the list.
Yeah, I'll be real quick, right? Like, number one, now that this has been leaked, of course, like we may see federal regulation, but probably not because the Democrats are too busy yelling about it. But the second, you think there won't be stay of executions? Like, you think there won't be like challenges almost instantly to those laws that are going to, you know what I mean? Like I just don't see this. I don't know. It just feels like fear mongering to me. I'm trying to connect this to reality of the situation, and I just don't see it connecting to the reality.
The reality is that these 9 states and these 13 states, these 9 states can't enforce these laws because of Roe v. Wade. As soon as it's gone, they can. It's basic how overturning precedent works. So Fabian, if you want to talk about logos, You have to actually connect your argument to the fact that an overturning of this decision allows 9 states to immediately start enforcing abortion bans and 13 states to immediately start enforcing them because they have trigger laws.
Which is why I asked you. You don't think there won't be immediate challenges in stays of execution?
You think
Not in
that
all
is
these
like
states.
peace of mind? You think that's peace of mind for people who like need an abortion now? You think that's peace of mind for people that's like, oh, don't worry, the courts will figure it out. Like it's going to be challenged. Don't worry. You think
if you have a stay of execution,
it doesn't fucking surprise me. It doesn't fucking surprise me that you're like, I don't understand it. Yeah, that's very unfucking surprising because you're not going to be one of the people that is forced to carry a child to term when you don't want to. You're gonna fucking listen. I'm getting so emotional because poor me with my fucking.
No, Fabian,
you're just wrong.
She's not wrong.
Like, I'm not fucking wrong.
Fabian,
and
you
let me just finish really quickly. Sorry,
Yeah.
and Taft, I know, like, thank you. I'll finish. I promise. But like, as an example, believe it or not, Wisconsin has a pre-Civil War abortion ban that could take effect the second Roe v. Wade is overturned. And here's the thing. In an election year, the Wisconsin Republicans have openly stated that they want to take that law further because that law does make an exemption in the case that the pregnancy is threatening the woman's life. But what the people who are running for major statewide offices in Wisconsin want to do is get rid of that exemption so that there are no exemptions for abortion so that you cannot get an abortion regardless if you were raped, if it threatens your life, if the child is not viable. Like, that is fucking insane. And fucking forgive me if I get so worked up in my little female brain about the notion that there are going to be women who die from this silly little thing, because I'm sure it's going to make them feel better knowing that people can challenge it in court, and then they'll just have to wait to get their abortions until that whole process goes through. What a comfort that is. Gosh, if only I had thought of that.
Can I just jump in and say, like, Maddie, you're right about I agree with you on. Okay.
I'm sorry. I gotta throw it over. I gotta throw it over to Taft because Taft has been waiting a decent amount of time. And then Preacher, you're on the list. Don't worry.
Quick then. Fabian, you said that we have to like contend with reality, and I agree. And the reality is that like when Roe v. Wade is overturned, there will be a number of states whose laws triggered to ban abortions, as well as the existing precedent on the books for these laws that is already there. I think you really do need to contend with this as someone who is an evictionist and who believes that like a woman's bodily autonomy is important to someone who's not pro-life. I think you need to seriously consider that and not just, pretend that nothing's going to happen. And I'm with you in like just wanting to talk about the legal argument because I think we agree on that. I think we agree that Roe v. Wade is probably not a good constitutional decision. But the reality is it's going to have these effects on abortions. And I think neither you or I necessarily believe those effects are good. So we got to contend with that other side of it.
I'm just stating that the idea that like once this happens, like all of a sudden everywhere these laws kick in and that there aren't going to be immediate challenges to these laws and that judges aren't going to order stay. Sorry, I said execution because fucking whatever, mandates or proceedings, right? That they're not going to order stays on whether or not these laws can be enforced until their state Supreme Court or until their, at the very least, this lower court goes through is also not reality. What's almost certainly going to happen is in a majority of these states, the moment these laws kick into effect, someone will take it to court. Some activist organization with a lot of money will take it to court. It'll end up getting fast tracked to the state Supreme Court, and they're going to actually use the not the draft, but the majority opinion itself, as well as dissenting opinion, as well as their own state case law, as well as common law, right? To then determine what is going to be happening in those states. Now, in some of those states, that's probably going to mean that abortion is illegal. And that is something that we all have to fight against, in my opinion, as an evictionist, as other opinions as pro-choice. I think that they should be better grounded in common law. I think they should be better grounded in human rights, because abortion, late-term abortions and dismemberment of bodies, in my opinion, is murder and not grounded in any philosophy of life or understanding of anything, but evictionism is. And I think that there's going to be some areas we agree and some areas we disagree. But ultimately, this idea that like the sky is fucking falling the moment that this comes out is literally just fear mongering of people that don't understand how the justice system works, or people that are trying to galvanize support behind their political tribe and are giving in to things that are just not true for the sake of making an argument against people that are pro-life.
So I wanted to throw it over to Eurodite. Preacher, could you wait till after they're done? Okay.
Okay. I guess I'll try to just contend with what Fabian's saying to move the conversation along. Fabian, how do you then feel about all the trigger policy that's prepared in a couple of the states, some of which Josie mentioned?
Yeah, I think the Louisiana one specifically, she said 4 months. It's fucking 4 weeks. It's fucking, I mean, there's no respect to bodily autonomy there. It's swinging right over to the other side. And it might as well just be, a fucking third world country law, that has no basis in anything other than just pre-modernist Christian philosophy that conception is life. And I think it's going to cause a lot of problems. But also, I think what is likely to happen is that it's going to be challenged almost immediately. I don't see very many people being affected by those things.
Right, but if it gets challenged and appealed, if it ends up back at the Supreme Court, it'll likely just get overturned because of stare decisis, and therefore in those states, even I'm having a hard time understanding what you're arguing, because no matter kind of how I swing it, even though I agree that like Roe v. Wade was a bit of a weird precedent, it's still a step back fundamentally for federal abortion rights, and there are going to be, and I know that you agree that there are going to be women that will not have access for a number of months, right? Because even these appeals processes, they can take up to 2 years. So women who are trying to get an abortion, like that's way too late for them. And so I'm curious, like when you're saying like it's not all this like doomsday, it's like, well, for like women who are like potentially right now booking abortions and stuff like that, like in these trigger states, like it is kind of doomsday for them, like in their personal life. Like if you're wanting to get an abortion, or if 2 weeks after this goes in a trigger state, you get pregnant, something happens, like maybe you're on birth control and you get pregnant or whatever, now you're fucked. And what if you're poor? You can't even go out of state and try to deal with this.
Right.
And
Because
so,
I mean, like, you'd have to be poor enough to not be able to go out of state, because but which is obviously a reality for some people.
So
but
it is doomsday for a lot of women. And so I think like the
again,
piece
I
where you're
don't
saying
think
like,
that's
it's
how that
not
works.
doomsday, like I get this, but this is like the emotional piece that I think is actually important for the olive branch of being like, for the individuals that this is going to impact the most, it can be doomsday. And so the next step isn't to say it's not doomsday, shut the fuck up. The step is, how do we move forward from here? Because it is almost unequivocal that federal access to abortions and protection is going to be lost in the states. So what do we do from here? How do we amend this?
Right. And if you want to talk about action and you want to talk about different things, I mean, that's a different debate, another debate topic. I'm all for talking about those things. But when we're just like reeing like at our fucking lungs and saying things that are just not true about how the legal system works, it needs to be challenged.
Fabian,
Okay.
so
Because we can't get to the truth if people are just saying
I'll let
bullshit.
Eric go.
Wait, no,
Okay.
no.
I do wanna go.
I gotta let Preacher go because Preacher's been waiting.
Yeah,
for
Josie,
the
you're
entire
gonna want
topic.
to wait for me to talk anyway, so you can come back at me, because I'm gonna go back at what I had said in my opening, and you wanted the
Give some-
proof of. It would be
Let's yell at Preacher some, all right?
yeah,
Give
yell
me
at me a
break.
little bit. Give the guy a break, jeepers.
Don't tell me what to do.
I'm telling you, damn
A
it.
beard.
California Bill number 223, Assembly Bill, AB 2223, introduced by Assemblymember Wicks, principal co-author Assemblymember Mullen. Existing law requires a county coroner to hold inquest to inquire into and determine the circumstances, manner, and cause of violent, sudden, or unusual deaths, including deaths related to or following unknown or suspected self-induced or criminal abortion. Existing law requires a coroner to register the fetal death after 20 weeks of gestation unless it is a result of a legal abortion. If any physician was not in attendance at the delivery of the fetus, existing law requires that the fetus or the fetal death to be handled as a death without medical attendance. Existing law requires that the coroner state on the certificate of fetal death the time of fetal death, the direct causes of fetal death, and the conditions, if any, that gave rise to these causes. This bill would delete the requirement that a coroner hold inquest for deaths related to or following known or suspected self-induced or criminal abortion, and would delete the requirement that an unattended fetal death be handled as a death without medical attendance. The bill would prohibit using a coroner's statements on the certificate of fetal death to establish, bring, or support criminal prosecution or civil cause of damages against any person. It was not misinformation. It was the actual bill sitting right there. That is not misinformation.
You're literally talking about because California has safe and legal abortions, but if someone still doesn't have access to abortions, that they should still not be punished for having them. That's literally what it says.
Let's not move the goalposts here, because what I mentioned was this bill, and you told me it was misinformation. I just read the damn bill.
It's not. You didn't say anything about like 7 days after birth. Come on, dude. Yeah, come on. Like you just literally just started reading a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I just started reading, but I just pulled that right out of my ass. I'm sorry if I didn't say so many F-bombs to make myself right.
7 days.
Wait, I can't hear it. I can't hear Preacher. What were you saying?
I was just saying if I had a couple more F-bombs in there, then maybe I'd be considered right. But I don't drop the F-bombs, so I must not be right. So I don't know, because that's evidently.
Well, you didn't say anything about 7 weeks. Okay.
Do you want me to read the whole freaky bill? I didn't think we had time for that. I was already getting this.
Let's not.
I read the course to the bill. Let's not do that.
Yeah, let's stay on topic, please.
Well, and that's what I'm trying to go with this. Everybody's so, oh my God, when this happens, women are going to listen. There's some states that probably, yes, are going to outlaw or whatever abortion. And there's some states that are not going to. But that's how this country's supposed to be. States have the decision.
Okay. But people have a right. People have a right to be upset about those decisions, right?
Right.
And
I agree. So I didn't say I don't.
I actually like Erudite. Like what you said was like so spot on. So I just wanted to add to that. The thing is that theory is important to discuss, but we also have to look at like how the realities of how these laws actually get enacted. The reason why I don't think I don't think that abortion should be a criminal issue or should be seen as like a legislative issue either way and should be a medical ethics issue is because of the realities of how you have to enact it, because of how pregnancy actually ends up operating. So there's situations, for example, Fabian said that he's fine with abortion, right? But he does have some disagreements where there's like you said, like dismemberment or a late term abortion, right? So what if like a woman wants to get a late term abortion, I don't know, like 8 months, turns out that her baby has like Tay-Sachs or something like that, it's going to die right away, that's severely painful death, all of that kind of stuff. It's going to be very dangerous for her to give birth. The doctors have all decided that it's important that she abort this child for very good reasons. Okay? And say it's legal. Say it's like legal.
Eviction.
Okay, say it's legal according to the government, right? How is she actually going to go get that legislation? How is she going to get this special dispensation? She's probably going to have to apply for it. I don't know about. I'm assuming your bureaucracy really fucking sucks there, just as it does here. It's probably going to take a few months. By the time that happens, the baby's already born. The baby's probably already died. Okay, it's already caused tons of trauma. It's already had like this a total disaster, and so. There's a reason why it doesn't make sense to like the criminal justice system is slow as fuck. It needs to be slow as fuck because it's the criminal justice system. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all to use that for abortion and for birthing rights in general because of the timing necessary.
Eris, the case on the docket already had that exemption built into it. And this was an extreme case. It went to the Mississippi case is an extreme case in and of itself. It's very, I find it very unlikely. I find it very unlikely that you're going to have any states that that deal with not allowing a woman.
This is happening already. This is
okay. You don't even know what the fuck I was going to say.
No, there were already multiple states that have laws that are either being proposed or that have passed and are waiting to then be implemented once this decision is handed down that prohibit abortion pretty much at all, even if the woman's life is threatened. And I guess I have a question because you say like
immediately going to get challenged, right?
I'm pro. Oh, that and that's what a
it's not going to go by.
What a fucking comfort. So I also, because you're pro eviction and anti-dismemberment, as you said. So in the case where maybe they do a test and the child is going to be born with like half of its head missing because this is something that happens, or a serious medical condition that also then threatens the life of the mother to carry it to term. Are you saying that you would then be opposed to abortion even if like the mother's life is threatened? If they can't, what if they have to dismember whatever? Like, what do you like?
It's simple.
Trimester abortion So you say that they have to do a live birth. You're saying you're going to force the mother to do a live birth?
No,
for
you'd
that?
have to do a
You
C-section.
you can do a C-section,
You'd
or you can
have to do a
induce labor
C-section?
and have an actual vaginal
Yeah.
birth of even a stillborn.
You don't get
Like,
to. You don't get to. Like, no. This is the problem. Is that the pro-choice movement does not have any philosophical basis for what it is that they advocate for, and this is why you see extreme. That there's none. It's all utilitarian.
Are you
It's all,
seriously going to sit here and
Yes,
say there's
yes.
no philosophical
I'm going to say that, and
basis
then
to allow
Okay.
the woman to have autonomy to their
There's-
body?
right.
Or
There's
people?
it's
Okay, I wanna hear him
completely.
say
It's
it.
Wait,
completely.
utilitarianism
it
is a philosophy.
Wait, okay, wait,
Yeah,
wait,
that's
okay,
what
wait,
Reagan
wait,
is talking about right
wait. Everybody wait. Let's let Fabian say his argument before we object to his argument, and then I put you down, your name down, you're okay?
Yeah, no, I mean the problem here is that we're doing this utilitarian calculus, and I would just say that consequentialism has no basis as a normative ethics. That's a different debate, because it requires one to be able to be omnipotent and know all of the future and able to actually make moral decisions. Instead, it's just hedonism, and it's about how people feel and about what they think the consequences will be, and you can choose which consequences you want to look at and which ones you don't. The only actual logical ones that are based in a form of philosophy that is grounded on a priori situations is the pro-life position and the evictionist position. I don't care if you have a 99% chance of dying. If you murder a developed child that has a brain, that has a body, you are murdering that child. That being said, I think that the woman's bodily autonomy absolutely is paramount here, and that she can choose to evict the baby from her body. She can choose, viable or not viable, to take whatever it is that is taking from her and say, I no longer want this in my body. What you don't get to do is take an ice pick to the central nervous system and then hammer it in, and then take clamps and take their little fingers and toes and their body and rip it apart piece by piece, and then vacuum out the rest of the body, and then say, but hey, it was an 80% chance that the woman was going to die. Well, what you did was fucking worse. But
Wait,
if you want to do a
Yeah,
C-section,
not only
wait,
is
wait,
it
wait,
not only
Fabian,
at that
Fabian,
point,
Fabian, does
Yeah,
one
some
women
women
just
just die.
Okay. There was like
fucking
3 separate people talking at the same time. Preacher, I'm going to put your
One
name
sentence.
down as well.
One
Okay,
sentence.
if it's one sentence, then we're going to go with Eris first.
yeah, let everybody do their feminist
Okay.
reading, and then we can get back.
I'm not even feminist. Okay, so you distracted me with that. God damn it. So that absolutely makes, you know what? Just next person. You distracted me with the reading. Sorry.
Okay, can I
I
just
got you,
redirect
girl.
us? Can I just redirect us
Yeah.
back to Preacher? Because to be honest, I think we're like quibbling over like the most effective style of abortion, which is like pretty devoid from what we're really talking
I
about.
remember
I wanted
my
to
point.
address. Okay, if you want to go, I just wanted to
I'm
ask
so
Preacher
sorry,
a question.
Erica.
No, go ahead, and then
Yeah,
I'll ask
okay.
Preacher. I'll ask
I
Preacher
and my
after.
memory is very tenuous thing. Okay. So the um why, if you, okay, does the fetus have the ability, or the baby, whatever you want to call it, would you does the baby have have an ability to choose euthanasia, right? Because normally they're going to die a very painful, especially in the case of like a lot of these births, they're going to die a very painful, torturous death, like not even talking about the experience of birthing the baby that's about to die, right? Can the baby choose
I don't
euthanasia?
think you get, I mean, like, again, I was asked a question about a specific scenario so that people could better understand evictionism. But I mean, if you want to go further down the rabbit hole, I'll answer the question, which is that I don't think that you can assume the emergent will of the baby as one of death. I think that, like, obviously, guardians have certain rights over their children. And that includes, understanding what, as an emergent adult, what it is their will is. And you could certainly make the argument, right? That one that was going to die a horrendous death in the few hours, that euthanizing the child may have been what it is that you think their wishes would be. But I think that you're crossing a line too far when you start killing and taking life from someone off of the assumption that this person is going to die, because at the end of the day, all of these things are probabilistic, right? Like, it's a 99.9% repeating chance that it dies. It's a there's plenty of things in palliative care, right, where you can make the child comfortable as it passes and unaware without actually engaging in the act of killing. But I mean, that's getting
That's actually not
into the
always the case.
Yeah,
but
not always, but there are
exactly.
plenty
It's
of
almost like
options
we're
in
having a
palliative care.
philosophical disagreement, right? So that's why there is a philosophical argument behind the pro-choice movement, right? There are different philosophical arguments, and utilitarianism, it's weird that you brought that up as a disagreement because utilitarianism is a philosophy. So even if you disagree with it, which I also disagree with it, it's still a philosophical argument defending abortion. So I
Yeah,
don't
I just said it's a
understand.
trash one.
No, you didn't. You actually said that there was no philosophical basis
Yeah, I
for
said
the
I don't think it
pro-choice.
belongs. I don't think it belongs to
No,
be in normative
what you
ethics.
meant
You
by
said there was
that,
no
right?
psycho-
In fact, you were
philosophical.
engaging in the exact same thing that you accused Maddie of, right? And what you really meant by it.
No, what I
No,
said was
no,
that
it
there
is,
was.
right?
What I said was.
Let
What
her
I said.
finish.
No,
Wait, Fabian.
you're telling me what I
stop.
said and wrong.
Fabian,
Well,
You are
let it-
doing the
what
same
you
thing to
said.
us.
Okay.
the-
Wait. I'm talking. Nobody else is talking. We're gonna let Eris finish. Then Fabian will be able to respond. Euro and Preacher are on the list. If anybody else wants to be added to the list, raise your hand.
Okay, so Fabian, what you meant was
But please
what
don't
you
tell me
want.
what I mean.
Well,
Just
you
said you're
did,
gonna let her
correct?
finish.
You
You're gonna let her finish.
you let me know what you meant, right? So I do know what you mean. What you meant to say was that you actually you just disagree with the philosophical basis of abortion, but instead you engaged in like this rhetorical practice that you accused Maddie of by you wanted to sound even worse than it really was when you could have just said the former. So instead you said it had no philosophical basis, which like is just obviously not true, right? You like counter that in your own sentence when you argue that it was utilitarian. So I just think that was really silly.
Yeah, no, don't try and gaslight me and keep telling me I said things I didn't say. What I said is that no basis in that it had no philosophical basis because it does not have a priori assumptions baked in, and instead requires an individual to have full knowledge of the future in order to make moral decisions, and that it is a system by doing utilitarian calculus that is able to pick and choose the degrees of which happiness and hedonism and things of that nature are in. So please don't say that I said things that I didn't say out of
You
context.
didn't say all
And
that.
then tell me what I feel.
That
right?
what you said
Like,
is an
no.
argument of one philosophy versus another philosophy. That doesn't mean that the other philosophy has no philosophical basis. You can just say it has an irrational basis, right? Or
Okay,
doesn't,
it
or
has
it's
an
not
irrational
valid.
basis and an
Okay,
illogical basis.
thank you.
I said those things in the full context
No,
of
you
what I'm
didn't.
saying. You're trying to pick out what I said as a means of attacking something that is based off of a question
No, I'm just trying to
answering about
demonstrate that this is an
evictionism,
emotional
which
issue
is
for
already
everyone.
which is already an aside from the actual topic of Roe v. Wade itself. Right,
I'm
so
trying to
multiple layers of
demonstrate.
abstraction
No,
where you're
Fabian,
gaslighting
even
me.
what I'm
So
trying to
no.
demonstrate is even though you think that you're like above like the emotions and all the rhetoric and stuff, so you're engaging it yourself. I recognize I engage. We're all engaging in it here. It's like hard to not engage in it, and we can try to reduce it as much as possible. But even you engaged in it there.
Right.
So
And now you're
Yeah,
telling me
by
that I think that I'm
describing the
above the
abortion as
emotional
murder.
rhetoric. Now you're
No,
saying
you're
that I think that
reading
I'm
into
above
it.
the emotional rhetoric when I specifically stated that a good argument has pathos, ethos, and logos, and that the
What about Migos?
pathos that the pathos needs to be connected to the other three in order for it to be an argument that is effective as well as right. So again, trying to reshape what I said and gaslight me over and over again, it's not going to work because I don't just sit around and just be like, oh, okay. I'm just going to tell you, no, you're wrong and stop doing it.
I mean, you said facts don't care about your feelings, but like fundamentally, when we get into these discussions about morality, it's going to be about feelings. And when you talk about like ripping limbs and like destroying the nervous system, you're using like the emotionally charged language of feelings. So I don't know. I think that like we agree on like 90% of this, but I also think that like I don't know. I think you're criticizing Maddie for something that we're all doing in the conversation and will all continue to do.
And like it's understandable because this is an emotional topic, and like it's hard to discuss it with yourself entirely removed. Oh, I'm agreeing with you. Damn it! It's hard to remove yourself entirely emotionally when like you're asking questions that are like in some cases life or death, and it's I don't know. I think it's really fascinating to watch someone in real time gaslight themselves. I never thought I'd see the day, and yet here we are.
All right, guys. Do you want to talk about the
Could
topic?
we let
or do you
Erudite
want to
talk?
talk
Because
about
I
like
like
rhetoric?
interrupted her and I feel
Please.
terrible about it.
I promise I'll redirect us to a more fruitful area.
Okay, great. Preacher, I wanted to ask you a question. Going all the way back to when you were talking about California and all these things, and if I'm understanding your position on Roe v. Wade being overturned, you're saying it's not that big of a deal because it's turning back the decision around abortion to the people and the states. And the states can decide with their own representatives and whatnot, and then abortion can represent better what the state's opinion is, which is what America is based on. Is that, I'm just summarizing your opinion. Does that seem decently accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Okay, so what do you feel then about like certain constitutional federal rights? For example, would you be okay with California 100% banning guns, like all guns in the state?
Well, I mean, you have, you got to go by the Second Amendment. That's a constitutional right.
Yeah.
But you do have states like California, New York, Chicago, or well, Illinois, that have extremely strict
Jersey.
gun laws, and yeah, Jersey. Oh my God, yeah. Their laws are extremely strict, but they're within the confines of the Constitution, and they're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I totally agree
I
with
don't
you.
agree with them, but hey,
Right.
that's
So the reason why we have certain federal constitutional rights is that we mandate certain things that no matter what states peoples even decide that they want, there are certain things that are inalienably protected as being just an American citizen overall. Now, the argument with abortion is that decisional autonomy and rights are an inalienable right for people to have, particularly when it comes to decisions on their body and their marriage and their child rearing practices. And that's what a lot of this comes down to, which is why Roe v. Wade being overturned, particularly with Casey, which Casey gets a lot more into the autonomy and choice and stuff like that. Casey being overturned is such a huge deal.
okay.
I'll toss it.
I get what you're saying, but then this comes down to where I'll probably take all the heat because I don't believe it has anything to do with the woman's body. I believe that it's a whole nother body. It's a whole nother being. When sperm meets egg, a separate DNA is created. It is no longer the woman's body. And I don't agree with Fabian at all, and especially with even when you try to lighten it with the word eviction or evictionist. No, it's abortion. You're terminating a pregnancy, and to me, what's happening right here is the exact problem why we get nowhere because you have someone like Fabian who's pretty much in agreement with most of you guys. It just has a difference of
Wait, Preacher,
when
can I
and
have your
how.
penny?
Hold on one second.
Oh.
When and how, but he's still in agreement that you have the right to abortion, and you
So
guys still fight against him.
can I
And
clarify
that's
your
the
position
issue
for a
is because no
second?
matter how much you agree with somebody, sometimes it will still continue to be an argument just for argument's sake.
So can I maybe clarify your position? Do you believe that life begins at conception? Is that kind of what
Yeah,
you're arguing? You said
I
DNA is
do.
separate DNA. Okay, so then why are we not investing all of our medical money towards stopping the blocking of implantation? Because lack of implantation will be the number one killer of human beings because about 50% of conceived eggs do not actually implant. So if anything, most conservatives should be investing most of their energy and dollars into making sure that implantation is over 50% because that's killing most of our babies then.
I
Okay,
also
and
I
we can
also
talk.
propose.
Hold on, she's addressing me. Hold
Yeah.
on, and we could talk about stuff like that, and we could talk about the foster care system and adoption later on. But can we stop killing the babies first? Like
Right. And
voluntarily killing babies.
implantation is killing most of the
But
babies.
that's not an intentional killing. An abortion is
No,
an
but it's different, right?
intentional.
Like just like cancer kills people, right? Like so we invest a lot of money in trying to like treat cancer, just like
Right.
ectopic
And I
pregnancies
agree.
kill
Okay,
women,
we
so
could
we
put
invest
more money
money.
into that. Let's stop tying up so much money into we should be able to kill babies, and let's put it into what you're saying there. That works for me fine. I mean, and what's her name on the View? She wants a sex a sex blockage fine or a sex uh picket. That's fine. Don't have sex, and you won't create babies to abort. I'm cool with that too.
I just want to address what Erudite is saying because I'm really glad that she's bringing it back to this discussion of constitutional law and specifically the 14th Amendment. And what Casey versus Planned Parenthood did is it looked at other, instances of agency and privacy in your own home and said that like abortion fell under this case. But I think what we see when we actually look at the 14th Amendment, or I know that we see this, we don't see privacy actually mentioned as one of the rights. That's been established in precedent. We don't see abortion as mentioned in one of these rights. So we're 2 layers removed here in far of abstraction from the actual Constitution. And I think we'd agree all here that personal agency, it only goes so far, right? So you don't have personal agency to do like illicit drugs to like shoot up heroin. Or to create heroin in your own home. So that personal agency only goes so far, and I think it's a legitimate question to ask if it goes so far as to allow you to destroy potential life. And that's a moral question that the country is frankly divided on. And we'll get into this in the next topic too, but I think that it should be up to the states to decide individually in communities whether or not they believe that something is morally correct or incorrect, whether the agency applies far enough or whether it doesn't go that far.
So like, I just wanted, because I know we're talking a little bit about the actual text of what the implications could be. And I wanted to point out a few things, because you're right. What this is essentially saying is it's passing down the job of legislating around what some people think as morally okay or not to the states. The problem is that this is the same kind of rationale that was used for a long time to ban things like women being able to have their own bank accounts or interracial marriage. Like, here's the thing. So when Casey is formally overruled, which is part of what's happening with this draft as it's written, states will be free to enact laws that concern a mandate that married women must notify their husbands before terminating a pregnancy. That means that states will be free to act all those laws. And it talks about fetuses being people as a matter of ancient law. And that kind of tees up the idea that fetuses are constitutionally protected. So no abortion anywhere as a matter of upon law. So its arguments undermine also all of SCOTUS's gay rights and contraception decisions with how it's written right now. So if you think they're just going to stop at abortion, you are fooling yourselves. They're going to make abortion a felony, and they're going to investigate miscarriages as felonies too. You know what felons can't do in a lot of states? Vote. They can't vote. And we've already seen states start to try to criminalize miscarriages. That is fucked up. And just for the record, a documented 1,600 women have been prosecuted post-Roe for actions deemed related to their miscarriages. And 1,200 of those prosecutions have happened since 2006. So if you think that they're going to make it so that, no, it's just abortion. No, they are going to criminalize miscarriages. And I don't think people who say, oh, no, I believe that a fetus is a person. Well, over 1 million miscarriages happen every year. And I'm not being invited to a shit ton of funerals. I'm not seeing people treat that as if it's personhood. No, it's a fucking tragedy when it happens. Yeah. But no one in their fucking right mind would equate that to being the mother's fault. What are we going to do? Are we going to consider that involuntary manslaughter? Please.
You're right. No one in their right mind would do that. That's why it's not.
No.
It's so weird that they're fucking trying to, dickhole.
If you read the Alito draft, he actually makes a distinction between these other arguments regarding like homosexuality or marriage rights, things that are privacy related and agency related. And he says that abortion is special and that it's different actually than these other rulings. So if we go by Justice Alito's own logic, right, his own opinion on this issue, he is saying that like there isn't precedent or reason to consider these other cases. So if we do see those other cases revisited, it would be going against the precedent that he's establishing like now in this year. We know that like stare decisis is very important, and so I think the kind of catastrophizing about next we're going to come for homosexual like sex or something like that, I think it's really missing the point or the arguments that Justice Alito is making.
But it's in that brief, so sorry, exactly no, but in that brief, let me refer to it though, because in that brief, the brief contrasts Roe with both Lawrence v. Texas and Obergefell versus Hodges, the former of which threw out sodomy laws and the latter of which offered protection to same-sex marriage. So those two, according to Alito, quote, lack any claim to being deeply rooted in history. What he's doing with that verbiage is he's opening the door to extend this decision to things like sodomy. I have to read past it.
Yes, there are other parts. There are other parts.
Oh
in
my
this
gosh,
draft that address this.
This isn't the
Literally
Bible.
every
You can't
single
just
legal
cherry pick it.
expert.
Come on.
Like, no, it's quite clear. That's why there's
Listen,
so
reading
much
it-
No,
Okay,
debate
okay,
out
okay,
there.
okay,
about this
wait,
later.
no,
Like, he doesn't just talk about this in one part.
Wait. Okay. There's too many people talking at once, okay? It got off the rails. So Josie was next on the list, so I do want to throw it to Josie. Preacher was also on the list.
So
I'll put you on the list.
yeah, so according to everything that Maddie said is absolutely right when it's referring to other cases and what it overturns and a lot of those things as well. But there's also that last line, but these things change and it's you can already kind of see what the objective is. But I do want to bring it back to legal precedent here. So Louisiana, I think, is one that wanted to say that these acts are murder, and what Maddie is saying is absolutely right about the miscarriages. So I've been going through the list, and almost every single state in the United States counts all felonies with no statute of limitations. Thus, there is legal opinion to believe that you could actually go after women that had abortions in the past because of the statute of limitations being none for things such as murder. So what that statute of limitations don't apply to murder?
The statute of limitations applies if you find new evidence of a crime being committed, right? Then you can prosecute someone that committed murder 10 years ago. But if murder was legal when they did it, you can't then prosecute them for a crime that wasn't a crime during the act. So that's just not how the law works.
I'm sure that's why there are data brokers. I'm sure that's why there are data brokers right now trying to sell location data for which women have visited abortion clinics. I wonder why that could be.
Do you get all your news from like conspiracy theory Twitter threads? Like,
Fabian, hold on. I got to respond to your point. I got to
I
respond
get
to
it from my
Fabian's point real
crystals.
quick.
Okay, quickly, but then we have to throw it over to Preacher, and I want to make sure Yura can get in
Okay.
here.
Absolutely. I want to talk about this point. Preacher. I mean, not Preacher. Sorry. Fabian. Fabian. What you're saying, though, is let's say that you're right. Let's say it doesn't apply to anybody that got an abortion during Roe v. Wade. But let's say somebody living in Louisiana goes to California where it is legal to get an abortion and then go to Louisiana. They can try that person for murder. Okay? Like that's what's going on, right? We are talking about the criminalization of people
also not
who
true.
give birth.
That's also not true.
Is that because
no, you
they
literally
tried to do it with trans rights recently in
you
Idaho.
can't. No, you can't arrest. If I go to Amsterdam and smoke weed, and then I come back to a state where weed is illegal, they can't charge me for smoking weed in a place where it was legal to do it. Same thing would apply to abortion. If you have a state law, if you have a state law,
in another
like
country,
you're talking about, you're talking about interstate commerce. You're talking about federal. You're talking about cross state lines, right? Like. No, you're wrong again. You can't charge people for ex post facto, and you can't fucking charge people for things they did that was legal in other states.
So you're saying that if you go to Louisiana and then you commit a heinous crime and then you come back to Louisiana and it's like, oh yeah, it's all good. I did it in another state. That's not how it works.
I'm saying I can go to Colorado and smoke weed and come back to Virginia and be perfectly fine because what I did was legal in the state that I did it.
There are laws that are specifically concerning interstate abortion. Like there's language in specific laws that specifically address this. So yeah, for a number of other things, like weed is legal in California. I can't be arrested in like Idaho for smoking weed in California. The issue is that there are states pushing certain legislation that would make traveling to another state to get an abortion and then coming back, they would make that illegal.
Yeah.
Yes, and coming back.
Because you go back into the state where you can be prosecuted.
Yeah.
Right. So
good luck. Good luck. That's all I have to say is the idea that law stands.
So
the idea that law stands.
Stop. Okay. You are all this is all getting off the rails. So I'm going to throw it to Preacher. No questions asked.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. It's a bunch of fear mongering. Is all it is because from abortion to now women who have miscarriages are going to be charged and gay rights are going to be taken away. Listen, you go to fear mongering when you realize like, damn, I'm wrong. All this is kicking abortion rights back to the states. Some states are going to have strict abortion rules. Some states are not. But that's the way we were designed to be because the states have different people in them who live by different people in California. are fine, well, for the most part. Most of them, I believe, are fine with their gun laws because they elected the people who are representing them that make these gun laws. People in Pennsylvania here, we wouldn't be so fine with that. And that's represented by the people we put into office to make our laws. And that's all it's supposed to be. And that's all this does. It kicks abortion back to the states where it's supposed to be. That's all it does. It doesn't go
It's
into
not
gay
fear
rights.
mongering when it happened.
Red
It's
and
not
Amber.
fear mongering when it's happened.
No,
and
you're
continues to
saying what's
happen.
going to happen. Oh,
Okay,
oh my
hold on,
God.
hold on,
No,
hold
we're
on, hold
saying
on.
people,
Can I just
women are
jump in?
being, women,
Stop.
Okay, please.
You're
Please.
bad faith fear mongering.
it's happening.
Wait. Okay, so the thing is, you guys are intentionally yelling over each other now. I can see it. Okay, please stop. Okay, it makes my job 10 times harder, and Geek is behind me asleep. Okay, and so
that
he's a sleepy Frenchman. Okay, and I don't want to have to wake him up. Okay, because I have to yell. Okay, so now I'm gonna have a little meter over here. Okay, on my phone, and it's gonna test the sound. And if it gets to a certain level, he's gonna wake up. So so we're gonna all keep it a little down and wait for people to finish what they're saying before talking. Can you talk, Eris?
Thank you.
I've been waiting for so long.
I've
been waiting for so long.
Multiple people have been waiting. Euro's on the list, so I'm gonna throw it to Eurodite, but I'll throw it over to you next, Eris, because I haven't heard from you in a while.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Preacher, the issue with all states when it comes to these things and why we make some things federal and like basically inalienable is because you can have systems where you get tyranny of majority, right? So this is why, for example, we typically protect sexual orientation and stuff like that, because you might be in a very red state that doesn't acknowledge your rights, but we view it as an inalienable thing that we will protect, even if the majority doesn't agree with you, right? That's why we have certain of these constitutional rights, which is super valuable. And what we're arguing is that probably a woman's right to make a decision should be one of these inalienable rights. And this is obviously something that needs to be worked out in the courts more. And so I guess what I want to say to the fear mongering is I think we should be really careful to talk about like, what are the trigger policies, right? Talking about the come back to state, like these are all valid fears. I don't know if you can hear me, Preacher, or not. But I think it's really important. Like I hear this on both sides of being like, oh, they're just fear mongering. But the reason why people fear monger is because there is fear and they're afraid. And sometimes they do it because they just want to morally grandstand and do that shit too. And I get it. It's annoying. But the reality is that there are a lot of women genuinely worried about what level of rights are going to be taken because the 14th Amendment is actually really fucking vague. And there are a lot of rights tied to it that like, if you take away abortion, you could justifiably take away other things because the 14th Amendment is by its nature vague, which is why it is just as justified to attach abortion to it as not to some extent. And so like I don't think it's useful in this Reddit to just be like, you're just fear mongering. But in that said, I think like Maddie, we also have to be careful like saying things like we're going to start like causing aborted women to go to jail and stuff. Like we need to make sure that we have evidence for these things because like what we want to do is get the voting populace on our side so that if we take this, for example, to Congress, or if we get into midterms, we can get people who are going to vote in the direction that we want to get, because at this point, we need to strategize. How are we going to get federal abortion protected? And the midterms are where we have to do it. That's the most important thing. So we've got to actually get smart about our rhetoric. We've got to think about what we're fucking saying. And we need to like stop saying things that are going to turn people off, right? Like if we talk with Preacher, I imagine there are things that would be more useful to say with Preacher or people in his more like vein of thinking that would maybe get them more on our side than other people. And I think like on the left, especially, I'm being like extra hard on us because like we have to get smart about this because if this is something you care about, show it and show it by doing it really fucking well.
Eris.
Right. So normally I would totally agree with like the conservatives or the right wing people here that the left is fear mongering because the left fear mongers like all the fucking time. However, like in this instance, I don't think that makes sense whatsoever. Especially I think the left has a very good rational reasons to be afraid, right? Women have very good rational reasons to be afraid. I mean, it was literally not so long ago when they were appointing Amy Coney Barrett, and people were anxious and worried about Roe v. Wade. I remember it was like constantly in the news, like the anxiety about that getting talked. And it was always all the political pundits on the right were always like, "Oh, stop fear mongering. No one's gonna get rid of Roe v. Wade. It's established law." Like even the justices said it themselves, right? And fear mongering, well, it ended up actually being a very rational fear because now it's getting overturned. So it's like, Yeah, I think people have the right to be worried about that. Now, that was my first point. Second point, preacher. So I totally I understand the like the state argument, even though it's somewhat foreign to me as a Canadian, because we don't put as much emphasis on our province's like rights. But do you think that in a state like Vermont, where the majority of the population are white people, that a significant majority, that and they probably, I don't know, white culture, or they have the aspects of that or something. Do you do you think that like a white bar owner would have like the right to not invite, say, like, I don't know, black people into his bar because he just doesn't personally like black people?
No, they're protected under Civil Liberties Act right there.
Yeah, but what if like the entire state decides that those are the values that they
The
want to
civil
follow?
civil liberties are federal, though. You can't violate the federal civil liberties.
So you agree that something should not be up to the states.
I agree. Some things that listen, we have a federal government for a reason, but a very small reason. And right now, our federal government is way too big to begin with. This is abortion law is far cry different from civil liberties
Sure,
or
but do
civil
you
rights.
understand that how, like, from a woman's perspective, why literally being forced to carry to give a part of their body against their personal will and potentially put their life at risk for the sake of another life?
Listen, okay, so
Why that
I
would be just as much as an important issue as a black person's right to enter any bar he wants,
all right,
regardless of his race?
I'll tell you what, and I'm gonna answer this. And I've been in your,
Repeal the Civil Rights Act.
I've watched your show before, and I respect you. So I'm gonna
Oh,
ask you
thank
this:
you.
are you sure you want my honest answer on this?
Yes.
Okay, here you go. A black man doesn't choose whether he is a black man or a white man or a brown man.
Okay.
That's not his choice. It's an immutable characteristic. A woman, more times than not, the pregnancy was chosen, even if protection was used. I know some like to use it as a badge of honor, the abortion thing, but honestly, it's not, because even if protection was, listen, if you lay down and a penis goes inside of a vagina, even with protection, there is that slight
Mm.
chance of the consequences of getting pregnant. That pregnancy was a choice, whereas the man's color is not. There's a huge difference, and so the woman's not being forced to carry something that she didn't choose to have.
I
But the onus goes on the men too. I don't want to ever think that I'm saying, oh, it's just the women. No, dude, listen. I was 19 years old when my first wife was pregnant, and I had a choice. Either we could do the abortion thing, or I could say, you know what? My life is not ready to be a freaking father, but you know what? Buck up, Buttercup, because you created a life. You are going to take responsibility. And I have a 30-year-old child right now that I love with all my heart. And I am so glad that's my badge of honor, is that I chose to do the right thing in that situation. And even though my ex-wife was a little bit psycho, she chose to do the right thing too.
Preacher, I'd be
I
curious, how
think
do you feel
that's
about aborting like rape? So conception through rape. Are
Okay,
you
see,
comfortable with that? No, no, no. I'm not trying to get
no,
a gotcha.
no, I
I'm
know you're
trying to
not.
see where
I know
you
you're
draw
not.
the line
I know
at.
you're not.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. This is where coming in as a minister plays into my thing. I believe if life was created, because obviously not every rape results in a pregnancy. I
Right.
believe
Yeah.
if life was created through whatever means it was created, that God intended that life to be. And I know there's many of groups on Facebook and different social media of children who are the result of a rape, and they talk about how glad they are that their mom decided, like, listen, that was a horrible situation in my mother's life. Nobody's gonna say that was not traumatic, but she decided to keep me and raise me, and I'm sure that's got issues with it too. But yeah, I don't believe in even aborting that. No,
Do you think that because of like, so do you think that legislatively you should impose your religious views on other people's decisions on their body?
no, and that's why I
Okay.
said this is where my ministry comes in. On that part. But it's not my ministry that's my even my Christian beliefs that are believe me, if my Christian beliefs are going to tell me that the Bible tells me that God knows me before I was even in the womb, but I don't go
Right.
that far back.
Right. So you're saying like the separation of church and state is valuable, like having policy and law that is separate from just a single religious
Uh,
institution is valuable.
it is. I do believe that, but it's also important for the person like myself to
Yeah.
separate myself as a minister from myself as a citizen of the United States, because I know the United States is a melting pot of religion and non-religion, and I cannot push. I don't want somebody else pushing their views on me. I
Right,
shouldn't be pushing
exactly.
mine on others.
And so I totally agree with you. And I have some level of religious belief as well, which is why I'm strongly, strongly for allowing people to have the choice for abortion or not, because I don't think that my religious views of conception of life should be superimposed on other people from a like fiat, like institutional level. Just like I wouldn't want, for example, if I was living in a different country, a different religion's views of, for example, how I as a woman should maybe dress to be imposed by the government, because I would disagree with that religion. So I think that's a big issue that I come up against with other like Christians, is saying like you don't actually get to impose your religious beliefs legally onto other people.
No, right, and I agree with that, but that's why when I have these discussions, I don't say, well, as a Christian, I believe, because actually my Christian beliefs go deeper. It's my beliefs as an American citizen and just as a person that life is created at conception, and to me that regardless of faith or anything, to me taking that life is killing, and I don't agree with it at all.
Right. I guess the one thing you're going to run into is that means that God plans for 50% of the lives that he creates to never actually be implanted and then to like fall apart. So I think that's like an area
That's actually
you really
man
just
doing
get
that.
into.
That's actually man creating
Implantation?
that. Yeah,
Miscarriages?
Okay.
that's man creating that.
I think
So
that's
people
pretty
that
like
have,
natural.
like-
Like most mammals
Yeah.
have similar implantation failure rates as well. Like that's just kind of uteruses. Like uteruses are just kind of like they're funny creatures.
Well,
wait.
uteruses
Maybe
are
I'm
made to
maybe I'm
fight
misunderstanding
off
you then.
sperm.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the fact that 50% of fertilized eggs do not implant.
Okay, I was
And
misunderstanding. I was thinking. Never mind.
Okay.
So then, if we're gonna go with the faith-based view, then I believe that if it didn't take, then it wasn't meant.
Okay, so
But
then
you
in
said
that
birth
argument,
started at conception.
yeah, so in that case, if God knew that somebody was going to like later abort because, for example, they were raped and they knew that they would hate their child if they saw the face of their rapist on their child for the rest of their life, you might say like God knew that that was going to happen too.
They say that again.
So if you said God knew that the egg wasn't going to implant, then that also implies that God might have known that the woman was going to abort, and that maybe wasn't meant to be either.
Well, you're getting into free will at that point.
I don't.
Yeah, I feel like we're diving
Well,
way
I mean,
too
it
far
could
down
be
the
a little
rabbit
bit
hole.
like
go a little bit deep. We can talk about that later.
Preacher, you went into theology, and not so erudite is following you down that path, and even down your path, that still isn't consistent.
Okay, if we want to
That's
stay on
what
this
not
path,
so erudite is
I'll show
saying.
you how
I
it's
mean,
consistent.
I'm
the
not
problem
saying
is just
no
that,
to
like,
stay on the path. I'm
if
just
we get
saying
into
that
theology,
you're
then
gonna
we would
challenge
start
me on
talking
it.
about all sorts of things. Like,
And it excludes like most of the panel, like theologically.
yeah,
I
exactly.
imagine most of the panel
Like, should
doesn't
I
care.
start
Well,
talking
how about
about
IVF?
Jewish law? It doesn't.
It also goes down the rabbit hole of like it may be consistent in his ideas, but like it's not consistent across the board of even all the people within that faith. Like so, like you have that rabbit hole.
I would say it's like within
You
the
know.
religion, it's somewhat inconsistent, but that's a whole other debate to get into. So we
There's
don't need to
actually a
talk
lot
about it
of
now.
Most of
there's
us
actually
have
a
some
lot of
type
religions. Oh,
inconsistency.
sorry.
I think
There's
all of
a-
us say that.
I just want to say that
There's a lot of
Wait,
religions
okay,
that actually.
wait. Okay, so I didn't get to hear what Kay said, so I want Kay to say it again.
I think a lot of our like beliefs in general, like I think we could all say we have ebbs and flows. Like it depends on one, your personal past, and then what you're living in now. So like at one time you might have been like, yeah, I'm completely open to the idea of abortions at any point in time, and then you've experienced some things in your life that were like, hey, now I'm kind of like really not so sure about this. Like my best friend conceived a child and it was a really shitty time in her life, but she made it into the best time, and that thing like that being brought her the greatest thing in this fucking world and made her into a better person. And like I was able to be there for that and experience that with her, which put me into a mindset of like at one point I was like, yeah, maybe this is a thing, but not for me. And now I'm like, no, like this is an experience that like you laid in that bed, like Preacher was saying, like you did that action. Like I think there are consequences to that action. You were part of that, both of you were part of that, and there's something that has to come from that. And I think because we didn't take the time to put certain precautionary measures into place, or because you even did the act in general, that it causes certain things to occur.
So, Kay, I have a kind of a hypothetical for you. So, let's say you get in a car accident and you shatter this person's kidneys, and the only way you're going to keep this person alive is by you sacrificing your. Let's say you don't have a kidney, so you only have one. You have to give your kidney to the other person because it was your action that caused that person to lose both their kidneys, and that's the only way they would live. You would
See, now
be
we're
okay
going
with
down this
that
rabbit
action?
hole. If I had
Well,
a
no, it's
second
about
kidney, if
actions,
if I
right?
was me right now, I've gotten into a car accident, I've caused injuries to myself, I've experienced that. If somebody else needed something from me, yes, I also fall down the rabbit hole of I think a lot of people should be organ donors because I think things like that would save a lot of people's lives. But I personally, if
But
I have one kidney, I can't give that up. I like
Do you
that's not
think the
possible. Like
government
legally
should
in the
punish you
healthcare
but
for
you
system, it's
doing
caused
not.
that accident, so therefore you should deal with the
And I would,
Equating a
yes,
consequences.
car
and
accident to having sex.
yeah, and
Am
I
I
will.
correct?
Yes, that's what we're doing right now, and I'll play with
Jesus
this game, but
God.
I'll play with this
Teenagers
compared to
game.
rape?
Wait, wait,
can
wait, okay.
accidentally
Wait,
pregnant.
I'll
Like
play with this
accidental
game.
pregnancy is not a thing.
Wait. Let's let Kay answer the question. Okay, I can't
I'll
hear
play
anything.
this game. But like if I cause an accident and somebody gets harmed, depending on how I was at fault for that accident, I'm gonna get charges pressed, I'm gonna get fines, I'm gonna have to pay for their shit anyways, my insurance is gonna skyrocket, I'm out of car, they're out of car, shit like that. There's other consequences that occur. It doesn't have to be me giving up my body for them. And those are things that occur, and that's not how like the system works.
But I think
So
that a lot
accidental
of people,
pregnancy
I
doesn't
think a
exist.
sorry, I
Accidental
think a lot
pregnancy
of
do
women
exist, but the consequence isn't me like dying because of it. There's certain, and like when I'm pro-life, there's certain standards that I set that like these are the one chances that I would say yes. And it's when rape or with something to do with the mother dying, or if it's at a point like the baby is dead or dying. Like those are my three like, okay, this is it. Like, and so I'm with you on that. Like, I'm not gonna give up my own body and die because I made a fuck up and now I can't handle this. Like, I have an IUD, and if I get pregnant, chances of ectopic pregnancy are very fucking high. So if something happened of that sort, I'm going to have to go and have a procedure to get that removed. That's something I understand willingly going into this mindset. I have one. I wanted one implanted. These are my consequences of if something happens throughout sex. But me dying because of that is way too far down that rabbit hole. I think that
But some states
belief
might want you to
my
take that
beliefs
chance.
is okay. And I don't agree with that.
I totally understand the
Fabian.
argument.
Oh.
So I totally understand the argument that like not having an abortion and choosing life is a very like moral thing to do, especially if like there's tons of shit that's going against you and you decide to sacrifice for the sake of like to give that child life. I totally understand. But I also think it's like incredibly moral thing if like Erudite gave her kidney to Fabian, right? Because she just really believed in like his ANCAP philosophy and just really wanted him to go preach it.
I want
so,
a kidney.
Like I think that would be a super moral thing, but I don't think that I would never consider if Erudite was like, no, fuck, I don't want to save your life, right? I want my kidney, even though I could give you a kidney, I just don't want to take the risk, right? Or maybe I just don't really like you. Like I don't know. Like wait, is she a criminal? Because
ANCAPs
she
buy
chooses
kidneys.
because she chooses something that has to do with risking her own body. So that's to me like where I just completely lose the argument. I totally understand why you would see the idea of choosing life as like a very important thing, but forcing that on someone for under the penalty of going to prison under like the
And
idea of
I
being
don't
a
agree with
criminal.
those. I
Again,
don't agree with those either. I think like I do agree there should be some type of like federal like, hey, this is like a baseline, and then states should have the ability to put more restrictions on it. We talked about gun rights earlier. There's a Second Amendment that keeps it at one point, and each state is able to do what they want within that. And I think that should occur. But I also don't think that like we should be completely like, hey, there is nothing or there is all. Like we need to find some type of boundary that we can all agree on, or at least within that state can agree on with the legislation that's passed.
Well, see, this is the problem: is that like when you take a fully pro-life position, you have to create you have to create like an arbitrary boundary, right? Like and that's really an issue because like if you say that any action that can cause harm to the child from conception is something that can be criminalized to a certain degree, then like why don't we criminalize women that are of childbearing age for smoking cigarettes? That's an active choice that they make that can lead to the death of what is defined as a child. Why do we not criminalize women for not having a proper diet? They're actively eating food, and if they are overweight, they're more likely to have a miscarriage, and therefore they're intentionally causing homicide because they had too many Cheetos or they went to McDonald's one too many
That's the
times.
thing. We can
mean,
go
the
off on these
answer is just
arbitrary
like
points and go all the way down this rabbit hole of like how bizarre and out of the picture these things are, or we can be like, hey, this is my belief and this is what it is, and we've got to find a boundary to like agree with that on.
It's
problem is
tyranny of
that
the
it-
majority.
At the end
Can
of
I-
the day,
Yeah.
it's just going to be moral intuition, right? Because we can talk about like, should it be illegal to do anything that might like deprive someone of potential life, right? Like if you give someone like $100, they might like suddenly decide that, okay, I'm now going to have like a baby. Does that mean you have like a moral obligation to like give them $100 because not giving it would like cause them to not have a child? Like we can invent these crazy hypotheticals where like doing one thing or not doing another thing deprives someone of life. But at the end of the day, I think it's just going to come down to moral intuition. And the fact of the matter is
Unless you're an evictionist.
there's about 30% of Americans who think that abortion past a certain amount of time, probably about like 15 weeks in the case of the Mississippi law, is morally incorrect. And so I think that you just got to like contend with it on those grounds.
The reality is that like any age that we set, like this is actually like, I don't know if anyone listened to the oral arguments in December, but if you're interested in this topic, it's a really, really good conversation. I don't know the name of the lawyer who is like defending against Mississippi, basically the woman lawyer, but she's based. But they talk about basically like fundamentally like the line at which we set abortion as like legal is always arbitrary, right? We set it at viability because like it kind of makes sense, but it's just as arbitrary of being like you can't terminate a baby if it looks like a human. But if it's at like weird dolphin stage, then you're Gucci, right? Like they're all kind of arbitrary. And like people try to be like, well, sentience and like all these things. There is no, like, we don't actually have the data. We might never have concrete, firm enough data to say like when is the best point to like say when like abortion should or shouldn't be happening, which is why I think at this point, the best that we can do is like stick by like, well, we should probably give people choice. It seems to be varied about how people feel choice should be implemented, but it seems like everyone was pretty comfortable with the age of viability cutoff. So like, I don't see a need to like really roll that back.
I just
Yeah,
think that there.
go for it. Go for it, Eris.
I just like, if we want to focus, this is one of the reasons why I consider the pro-life movement not pro-life. And I consider it anti-choice. And it's not just like a word usage, because if we were focused on being pro-life, which I mean, some people genuinely are. Like some people just like really love babies. I love babies, right? The idea of someone ending a pregnancy, it makes me sad, right? But but there's so many other solutions to it. UBI, the majority of people who are so-called pro-life are usually against any form of UBI. They're usually against a welfare state and all of these things. If I said, why don't we pay people to have babies? Like, why don't we pay people to parent, right? Why don't we pay people to keep their babies and help enable them? Like, they would almost always dismiss those ideas. When I guarantee you, probably finances are a huge part of why people feel so forced to make those decisions. There are just so many other things that we can do, or like improving prenatal care, or just reducing people from getting pregnant. Helping with contraception, reducing people from getting pregnant when they're in shitty situations. There's so many other solutions to doing it, or also just like convincing women to choose life by providing them a good support system and all of that kind of stuff. But I almost never see that stuff happen. It's very frustrating.
That's a complete false equivocation, right? To say that somebody is anti-life or they're anti-choice because they won't support your specific government programs that take money from people as a means to change the material conditions, and then use a consequentialist analysis about like how this will lead to less abortions or how this will lead to better outcomes, is not the same thing as someone that has a deontological position that murder is wrong in all of its forms and they believe that abortion is wrong. Like, these are two totally different things. You're using your own rationale to try and understand conservative thought and then say from your own position that you already hold that the conservatives obviously are not consistent, when you're just using two different moral frameworks.
She kind of said that when she was like, I don't see it as this, I see it as this, but go off, use your entire vocabulary in one. So what I wanted to say was this: the General Social Survey is a national biannual poll that for half a century have asked Americans about their views on various social issues. One of the key polls where they ask about Americans' views on abortion. It's one of the best ways that we can see over time how those views have evolved. And one of the things that's really interesting, because I know someone brought up how the general population feels about abortion. And the interesting thing is that very few Americans support outlawing abortion entirely, and actually more than half believe it should be legal for any reason. Now, when you break this out by Republican versus Democrat as self-identifying, you get something, because most Republicans do support the availability of legal abortion in some circumstances. Those circumstances include when the mother's health is at risk. And the actual number for that is that 4 in 5 Republicans think that abortion should be legal in that situation. And like, this is something that's conducted regularly. So to think that somehow this decision is going with the will of the majority of the American people is just not true, because the majority of Americans on both sides of the aisle support access to legal, safe abortion.
Maddie, I think I brought up the percentages, or maybe someone else did, but I brought it up and I said about 30% of people believe that there should be restrictions on abortions. And I'm obviously, I think I'm working off a different study than you are, because the one that I saw was 40% believe there should be absolutely no restrictions or very minimal. And then 70% of people said that or 70% of people in total said there should be access to abortion in some sense, at least with restrictions. So, as far as I'm aware, it is a majority of people, like a vast majority of people who are aligned on this topic. And at the very least believe that you should have access to abortions with restrictions or, yeah. So, I think we should acknowledge that. So I agree that like it is not quite so black and white. It's just like Republicans, Democrats. I do want to
ask both of you something, like, why does it matter?
Wait, but after
agree?
this though, please give it over to the preacher. I got to use the bathroom. I've been waiting. Okay.
I'm just curious, like, why
You don't think public
Maddie
opinion
thinks
matters when massive like decisions are going to affect the lives of the majority of Americans? You don't think like it matters what public sentiment is? It just matters what yours is, right?
No, and actually this kind of what Maddie's bringing up kind of feeds into what I was actually going to ask the panel here. But first, let me say it's dangerous to say that this poll says this, because really it's not 4 out of 5 Republicans. It's 4 out of 5 Republicans that they asked. That doesn't mean the entire Republican base.
I'm aware of how marketing studies are conducted.
Okay, well then to say all Americans or the majority of Americans, no, the majority of the people they question. But then that leads to my question, because like I said, I've had this debate on these panels before, and I was willing to concede at least to the heartbeat law, and I was told by the left, no, we'll make no concessions. So I want to ask on here, those who are for abortion, at what is there a certain time that you would say, okay, let's cut it off, no abortions after such and such a point? Is there a point in the pregnancy where it shouldn't be terminated?
I'd say 6 weeks, probably.
Viability.
Yeah, I'd say viability. Not 6 weeks. 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Most women don't even know it until.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I'm just saying after that, I would say eviction, right? Like,
I don't think it should be a
I don't
criminal
care
issue at all.
Like, I don't. I don't. According to the I mean,
but
like,
you
it's
are saying
be,
abortion is bad after that time, and you'd prefer removal.
Yeah, I'm an evictionist, right? Like,
okay,
so I don't think you should abort
do think
unless
abortion is wrong in that case.
Well, I think abortion is wrong once you have a body, and once you have a primal streak, and once you're going beyond what is a base central nervous system and going into the primal streak, and like the brain is beginning to develop. It's difficult to find out where exactly that line is.
Like 11 weeks, because that's when the 5 main primary vesicles are determined. Like based on what you're saying, like I think
but
I think 24 weeks is the best measure. It looks like a human. It seems to be like the brain is at this point just like it's getting more folds and gyri and sulci, so it's like broadly just like in human cases it's pretty large at that point. Even if you get an abortion, it's super invasive, just like a pregnancy would be invasive. So like I don't know, it's like this, it's all of this is just like a cost. It's all of it is going to be a cost. Hold on, all of it is a cost versus risk analysis, right? The 15-week cutoff, the major reason why that's argued is not. Yes, it is. All of this is a cost risk analysis. There isn't actually a super good reason why 24 weeks is any better than 6 weeks, other than basically being like, well, they're more developed. And at that point, the woman's gone through a lot of the cost of pregnancy. She's already gotten like, impacted by her pregnancy. Her hormones are changed. Her ankles are probably hurting by this point. The baby's pretty large. It's decently complex. It's got a brain, all sorts of things, right? And it can be fostered out now at this point. There's all sorts of reasons why we pick 24 weeks, but it is kind of arbitrary. You could pick 15 weeks, but then you're just limiting a bunch of women who typically between 15 and 24, the only women accessing it are usually like for extreme emergency needs, like medical conditions, their partner leaves, or it's typically like young women who have no idea anything about pregnancy and they like don't realize that it's weird to like not have their period.
You're operating in a dichotomy. You're operating in a dichotomy where there's only abortion and pregnancy, right? Like I'm operating in.
I'm just not interested in the
spaces.
eviction conversation. I'm just not interested in going there with you because I think it quibbles too far away from the Roe v. Wade, and it's too far from like the actual lived reality of what we have operating in America.
This entire
right now.
debate has gone away from Roe v. Wade. It was asked a question about when is abortion appropriate. Now, look,
okay, but it's still evictionism is just boring to me. I don't care. I can have the conversation with you about eviction later. I think it's actually an interesting idea. The issue is that I just don't think it's concrete to what we're talking about right now.
I'm just gonna state, right? Like you can say 24 weeks is viability, right? But there's a massive problem with that, which is that viability is one probabilistic, right? There is a possibility that 21 or 22 weeks could be viable. There's also the fact that as technology increases, viability will go further and further away as artificial womb technology increases, right? So I mean, like the idea of like it's okay to dismember a body and to actively kill something, right?
That's your feelings talking right now. Just like
that's
you know.
not a that's not a feeling.
It's no scientific.
You're using emotionally charged
so
language.
No. Hold on. That's not true at all. Like it's feelings and it's science. Like if you're dismembering and killing a like viable life, it is killing it, and you do have feelings about it. But also like we shouldn't grandstand. And I don't think Fabian was morally grandstanding at that point. And like it isn't the scientific consensus that like fetuses aren't a life before like a certain age. There's for sure no scientific consensus on this.
And that's the thing I was going to say for viability. I know we talked about the idea of 24 weeks, and the only reason 24 weeks stands out at all is because the chances of surviving afterwards are higher than 50%. That's literally the only reason of why at 24 weeks. If you had a baby at 24 weeks, whether vaginal or cesarean, there is a above 50% chance of that baby surviving. Before then, it's less than 50. So that's why they cut it off there. So that's why like 24 weeks is like the standoff like weeks of when people say. But like we all just stated, technology advancements, chances, like there's always that what if, like you could survive, or like a baby could survive earlier than that, but that's the moral consensus as of today. Like it could change within the next year or two based on technology, based on the way we take prenatal care, stuff like that. But I feel like even then, like that's a chance that they're viable to survive on their own, but the purpose of being in the womb is to care for them alive, for them to grow. So for myself, I think it's even before then.
So, do you realize as well that only 1% of abortions happen after 21 weeks? And most of the time, that is because of the cases that we're talking about, like the mortality of the infant or the mortality of the mother, which is that 1% number. 90% of women actually get their abortions in the first 13 weeks or 16 weeks.
There are other reasons, but they're limit cases, right?
Yes.
Like, for example, Down syndrome and things like that are often offered.
Yes, because those don't get tested until later on.
Yeah. I mean, you can't confirm them unless you go into the womb or you like wait until much later.
Yeah. And also, I think the bigger issue with that is like we're talking about percentage. Well, like percentage chances of like rape cases are 1% out of all abortion cases. 12% are all related to health conditions. Like there's a lot of like different possibilities of why, and like those are the two reasons I'm fighting for. So those like account for 13% of abortions. Like the other percentages, what are those? What are all of those, and do they actually stand any ground? Like, that's my concern.
But Roe v. Wade was the thing protecting you from those cases that you even care about. Like now, it doesn't matter what you feel as a person that can give birth. Is the fact that you don't have that choice anymore in some places in the country, and you do seem to care. If it's going to kill me, I don't want to do it. But in some states, they don't care about that. So regardless of how you feel, and that's the whole point about the civil rights and human rights issue of people who can give birth, right? It's the fact that we aren't able to make those choices anymore.
But
regardless of how you philosophically feel about it.
I don't think overturning it is going to completely eliminate those opportunities.
It will.
But again, if you
trigger policies. That's what we're saying.
If you're
Fabian,
a conservative,
stop.
Okay, guys, we actually have to move on to the last topic. And I do want to make sure. I mean, we've been arguing the morality of abortion. That's not going to stop. I don't think we need endings. I don't think we need ending statements for this. I think we've had a natural flow of conversation generally the whole night. Preacher, you got to talk, right? While I was gone. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Just making sure. Thanks for all the gift subs, by the way, chat, and everybody in chat. Hey, I have to sit through all of this. I deserve a paycheck. Just throwing that out there. Donos, subs, gift, everything. You could give it to
Honestly,
charity.
God bless you doing it every week, because I haven't debated in a long time, and watching debates and stuff like that, you're like, wow, this is pure chaos sometimes. Like
It can
when
be
we all
chaos.
start screaming over each other.
That is.
Thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your bravery.
I'm the real hero.
So, Dylan, you go to the bathroom and you get gifted subs?
Yes.
How the hell does that work?
How does that work?
Maybe I need to go to the bathroom more when I'm streaming.
Royal poops.
The difference is I have CIA handlers. Okay. That's the difference.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that, dude. I'm sorry.
That's
Yes.
true. The
My bad.
movers and shakers do
Movers
their
and
job.
shakers, baby.
Yeah, he's on
Movers and
Fed
shakers.
salary, guys.
Yeah, my bad. I
Obviously.
forgot about that.
Amen.
Okay, since I didn't get a closing statement, I just want to say that if if abortion had been allowed and baby Hitler had been aborted, the Holocaust wouldn't have happened.
That is a good point. So we're gonna move
Unless
on.
mom really
Well,
wanted
you
to
guys
keep
know.
him.
Can we talk about Netanyahu too? Like maybe he could have been aborted.
If Putin was aborted, if I was Putin's mother, I'm not bringing back that meme. Okay.
What if George W. Bush Jr. could have been aborted?
Okay.
We would save so much money.
Let's go on to the let's go on to the last topic.
Abortion.
The federal codification of abortion protection. So one of the things that people are talking about is the federal codification. Now that Roe v. Wade might be dead, if it is dead, then one of the path forward for Democrats who are fighting for abortion rights, or whatever you want to call it, is trying to codify these protections on the federal level. So my question is very simple to wrap up the night. Should abortion rights be codified on the federal level? We've already talked about this, I think, a little bit, but I want to get everybody's stated position on it. I'm going to start with Eris.
I would say that what I think you need to codify is that this is not a criminal issue and shouldn't be regarded as a criminal issue, that it should be something that's up to the medical ethics boards, and the woman should never be seen as a criminal for doing what's considered, I don't know, an unethical ending of her pregnancy. That should always be seen as like a medical ethics issue associated with the doctor that's practicing, and the doctor should be under some kind of legislation on how they're supposed to enact that in the most ethical way possible. That I do not understand. The concept of a criminal is that they are a danger to society, and I have a very hard time understanding the idea that women who have abortions are a danger to society, and why that should be something criminal. So I still haven't heard an argument at all from anyone on the panel about why it should be considered a criminal issue, and why that's a good way to reduce abortions or anything. Yeah.
Fabian?
Yeah, I mean, the issue that I see with it is I wonder, especially with a conservative court, like whether or not this falls under interstate commerce, or whether or not the kind of like incorporation doctrine can be used in this. And so I do worry that a federal law may be challenged again and overturned for those reasons, because they see that it's not an interstate commerce or something that can be incorporated. If it's like, can we have the 14th Amendment? Like there is precedent for 14th Amendment, like being incorporated to a certain extent. So, I just worry that might not happen. I think what we need is a actual like compromise here. I think what we need a comprehensive bill that allows for abortion up to what they consider to be a human life, not viability, and then an evictionist standard. I think that this bill also should come with some benefits to the left, in terms of certain practices. But I'm not sure what it is like, but certain care, changing the material conditions. I think some bones that should be thrown to the right is we need absolute foster care as well as adoption reform. It is utterly ridiculous how expensive it is to adopt. And so I think we could really do a much better job of reaching across the aisle, if you will. I hate saying that as a fucking anarchist, because at the end of the day, I want this shit all gone. But in the here and now, I think if we could make adoption much cheaper and much easier, it would make it a lot easier to change the view of the person that's struggling with whether or not to get an abortion, because it would be much cheaper to kind of finance their pregnancy so that adoption could be a simple and cheaper procedure. And so I think some type of bipartisan legislation that can determine that hopefully is the best route. But again, because of those certain issues, I wonder that it won't be challenged and we won't be in a lot of court battles back and forth over and over again. I don't know.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to Rose. I said Rosie. Josie.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Every time I hear Fabian say evictionist, I think of that like Mean Girls meme. It's like, stop saying fetch. Fetch isn't going to happen. Okay. It's the pro-choice movement. Okay. Going on with the idea as well, because I think this really speaks well about federal law and how laws are written as well, that we should also broaden the language, because people can become pregnant, and it can be of all genders. So we also need to include those protections. I know it's new to my own vernacular as well, but it's people who can have pregnancies. Trans people, trans men, and non-binary folks need access to abortion as well. So moving on to the federal law question and codifying it, there's a couple of things, right? And this is where I start thinking about, like, okay, if I was in office, if I was trying to legislate, which type of strategies would I use, right? You could create a bill and have that bill go and say, hey, this is going to give federal protections to people who can give birth, to have autonomy over their bodies when it comes to pregnancy, right? We can have that conversation. My only concern with that route is that the Supreme Court can be like, oh, this is against the ruling, this is against the Constitution. And we already know how the Supreme Court's going to go, and they could literally overturn federal law, making it enshrined that this is a pro-life country. So that's one of my fears about doing federal legislation and codification, because then the Supreme Court's going to challenge that federal legislation, which is very scary. So then you have to go back and to think, well, what about constitutional amendments? And that's a tricky little thing too, because you can have different states saying, okay, we're going to try to do this, and we're going to have like a convention of the states to try to codify abortion law, but nobody's done that since like the 1800s, if that ever happened. I think it may have happened once, but like nobody's really ever done that, right? So we're afraid of like what precedents and what can of worms is going to bring that with the constitutional convention of trying to codify those laws. And what if we lose? Like, the people are afraid of losing a constitutional convention fight as well, and also bringing up other things that we could possibly bring to the table, which there's like different precedents. Again, it's like Wild West territory, because it was being done during the Wild West era. Okay, lastly is trying to get the Supreme Court to, not Supreme Court, sorry, the Senate, to say we're going to have a constitutional amendment. We have the House and the Senate do that, where we're going to have a constitutional amendment, and then we can make it happen there. The only issue is with the filibuster and the things that it all comes back, right? All of those things would prevent any type of ability to amend the Constitution. We haven't amended the Constitution since, I think, 89. I think of 89, if I can recall. So we used to do it all the time. And it became, all of a sudden in America, we just stopped doing it. And we stopped bringing up the Constitution as a living document that it was. So if I had it my way, I would say that you would remove the filibuster and actually start trying to pass constitutional amendments again in this country, and actually start using the document that the founding fathers left us to start doing some good with it, like we can and have access to as Americans. So I know there's a lot of avenues we can go that way, but I have thought about those things thoroughly, about how I would try to propose legislation if I was in a federal sitting seat.
Okay.
So I kind of mentioned this earlier when we were talking about the idea, because we somebody brought up the idea of guns and how states have their own different legislation for that. And I think that's how it should be with abortion. I think there should be like a level playing field across the board, and that states should have the rights to make these decisions. We've all mentioned the idea of voting for your state representatives and how that affects you locally, and that it is a state by state basis for a lot of things. And I think this may be one of those things. I don't think that the government should be as involved. The federal government should not be as involved in most of our business as they are currently. And I think limiting that more to the states is more beneficial for most of us. And the more power we continue to give to the federal government just gives them the opportunity to keep pushing more and more down our throats. So that's about it. And I know somebody mentioned something about criminalization, and I don't think anyone here has answered that question because I don't think anyone here thinks that it should be criminalized at all.
Okay, I'm going to throw it now over to Maddie.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, the audacity of politicians right now who are like, "Damn, that's wild. I hope someone does something." Like, yeah, big same. And for those who are saying like, there's no point in Democrats passing a federal law holding abortion rights, the court would just strike it down. I think that's a dumb, bad take. Almost the entirety of the draft opinion says that Roe has to go because it's the legislature's place to pass such a law, not the judiciary. So this whole draft opinion is basically saying, no, this should be decided by the legislature. So I think that would probably be the way to go. Obviously, the biggest thing that is hindering any sort of progress being made in the legislature to codify abortion protections is the filibuster, because the filibuster pretty much protects the legislature from passing anything that might be considered somewhat controversial, even if it's widely popular among people. And to those who think that, oh, it's just adoption's the answer. While adoption is a good thing, and I do agree that, you know, it's a good idea to bring down the cost of adoption and make it easier for people who want a child that cannot have one by natural means to be able to adopt. Just right now, today, there are over 400 children in the foster care system. And that number alone should just, I mean, it's striking. And it just exemplifies why, like, saying that a woman should carry a child to term and incur all of the financial, emotional, and physical costs associated with that so that they can just adopt the child out. No, I'm sorry. You don't get to trounce on our bodily autonomy just for that purpose. In fact, it actually was really concerning. I feel like not enough attention is being drawn to this one area of the draft. Alito's draft on abortion uses the phrase domestic supply of infants. It's real. It's on page 34 of the draft. Domestic supply of infants, which basically means they want to force some women to have children because other women can't have them. Sound like anything you've seen on TV recently?
And Maddie, I just want to amend really quick. You said 400. It's 400,000.
I said 400. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I said 400,000.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
like,
I
that's
just
not
wanted
that
to-
many. You guys are really solving that problem.
I know it's my
Yeah.
mic. I thought.
Yeah,
I thought I like
400,000
solved
is
the
a much
problem.
more-
settings, I think the Discord settings aren't you're like cutting up every now and then. Maybe choke up.
I know. I've tried to like work with that. I know. Sorry, guys. But yeah. So just as a heads up, like that, the fact that that is specifically called out in the decision, that is fucking heinous. And then one other thing I want people to think about. It's important to remember the human tragedy of all of this, not just for those who will be forced into motherhood, but for all of us who won't get to experience the fruits of female talent that's cultivated and female ambitions fulfilled. Forced birth is such a needless waste of human potential. There are also millions of men's lives who would be much worse without women being able to choose to have an abortion. Men who wouldn't have found their big love or have the kids they have now, or wouldn't have been able to choose the career they want, wouldn't have taken the risk they need to get where they are. Many of them don't even think about it. I would say many of them don't even realize that abortion was something that impacted their lives. They don't. And yet it has. So how many men are sitting in elected office right now, or running companies, or caring for their children, their wanted children, because they weren't forced to be fathers before they were ready? So that's just something I want people to think about. And I'll leave you lastly with this for the guys who are not for abortion. Just a tip. So if you think Roe's demise won't affect them, child support payments usually start at 1/4 of your annual income. So good luck.
I'm gonna throw it over to Eurodite.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Yes, I think it should be federally protected. I mean, I'm coming from a nation where like we literally have no legal standards about anything around abortion, and honestly, our abortion rates are going down. I think pretty much every side should be concerned with efforts to basically see reduction of abortion overall, because even those who get abortion, it's usually like a difficult situation, and things like obviously like it needs to be available, because there's cases where like I did use contraception, whoops, didn't work. But for a lot of people, it's like I'm too poor, I can't be impoverished for the rest of my life, and there's really like sad decisions that get made around it that could be improved by things like availability of contraception, better sex education. And I wish I saw more sides talking about these types of things. Finally, I don't know how I feel about using the foster care system and suffering of kids to justify basically saying like they'd be better off dead. I think that that's like not the strongest talking point to use. But overall, yeah, we should absolutely federally protecting women's right for an abortion.
Preacher.
No, I don't think that there should be a federal regulations on abortion. I believe it should be with the states. I believe we have our elected officials in each state that represents each state individually and the people's choice in that state. As far as, how many men are in office because of this and that, well, I wonder how many men and women could have been something that were aborted. And one thing we're not taking into consideration here, we're all talking about bodily autonomy. What about the autonomy of the child? We're not even thinking anything at all about that life that we are aborting, the potential of that life, of who that could be, the next star athlete, the next president.
Baby
If we want to go
Hitler.
down that path, right? No, but it's me going right now, opening. Yeah, because all of them are going to be baby Hitler. See, fear mongering right there. Thank you very much. You just proved my entire point about your entire conversation about fear mongering. There's no need to fear monger. We don't know what lives we're snuffing out either. And as far as, and this may draw the ire, but whatever, if abortion is made against the law, then yes, it should be a criminal act. And a woman should be treated as a criminal because she broke the law. Now, where does that make her a threat to society? Well, if she's willing to break that law, what other laws would she be willing to break? We don't know. But listen, if it's made a law, laws are meant to be followed. If you break that law, you are a criminal, plain and simple. So it can be unpopular all you want, but that's just the cold hard truth. If laws are made and you break them, you're a criminal. That's what a criminal is.
One question though, Preacher. What if
Yes,
they're not
sir.
baby Hitler? What if they're worse and they're James Corden? I
True.
rest my
Listen,
case.
tough.
listen,
I rest
listen.
my case.
That you're talking about two people in the entire population.
One James Corden was already disastrous enough. I can't deal with another. Okay? I'm going to throw it over to Taft.
Yeah, so in regards to the effects of abortion, there's really strong sociological evidence as to the beneficial effects. When you look at the crime rate drop since the 90s, you can actually attribute a significant portion of that to abortion and to other access to, safe and effective means of preventing pregnancy. And it turns out that when you allow people to manage when they have children, you end up with a lot better living situations for those children. So what, children that would otherwise grow up in homes that are very difficult and set them up for failure later down the road, parents are able to manage that. And so Preacher, he asks like, what about the men and women who were aborted but could have, ended up the next star athlete or the next president? When we look at statistics, it turns out that that's not really what we're seeing with like abortion. Even just like year to year, when you look at when abortion was, allowed by the law, there are significant differences in the crime, and it drops off precipitously. So that's just one sociological effect. There's a lot of them. I think that if you if you leave it up to the states to determine abortion rights, what's going to happen is that red states are going to become worse places to live in a lot of ways because of that abortion and because of those sociological effects. And so I think that a state should be able to make itself worse based on their moral intuition within the bounds of the Constitution. And I think that's within the bounds of the Constitution to disallow abortion and then deal with the consequences. That's going to mean that young women, professional women, are not going to want to live in your state. People are not going to want to start lives in your state. There's going to be bad effects in regards to crime in your state. And I think that if you want to take that bullet, if you want your state to deal with those effects because your population believes so strongly in limiting access to abortion, I sort of think that that should be, your ability as a state to do that. As long as, and there's a second part to that is I would really love to see, enabling people the ability to move between states more. So, in my perfect world, this will never happen, but I'd love there to be some, grant that allows people some ability to move for job opportunities and just enables moving in general. I think that would be really cool as if you got more choice in your states. But yeah, I think that there's good arguments for why states should be able to make themselves worse. But at the end of the day, if it does get passed, that's the law is the law. And the United States isn't going to really suffer for allowing abortion across the board.
Okay. Open discussion.
Real quick, Taftash, that idea that crime statistics went down because of 18 years after Roe v. Wade 73. There have been studies that really show that that's just not true. And in what occurred more likely was unleaded gasoline and the fact that we got rid of a lot of lead, and that is actually what likely did it. And the way that we were able to determine that is because irrespective of the abortion law in other industrialized Western nations, the same rate of crime dropped everywhere. And it wasn't actually the abortion that reduced crime heavily. It was popularized by Freakonomics. But it was actually more likely the lead, though there may be some causal factor. The correlation is nowhere near as strong as people like to think that it is. And it's likely had very little, if nothing, to do with abortion.
No, I have to reject this totally. Lead was very important, but you can actually look at the year by year difference in crime rates when abortion, is allowed in these states as a result of Roe v. Wade. Or you look at previous decisions, and the same data holds true to a 0.01% statistical significance. So it is significant. I'm not saying it's the whole effect, though. To be clear, I'm not saying it's this is the reason why crime rates dropped. I'm just saying it is an effect.
After the panel, can you send me
there.
a study on that? Because all the studies that I've seen,
yeah, I will.
We also see the exact same trends across the board in other developed nations, when it comes to increasing access to abortion and reduced criminality. It's something that a lot of actually lefties don't like talking about, right? Because there's a lot of them I don't know. There's a lot of debate within leftist circles on the concept of criminality and racial stuff associated with it. But it is Taftash was 100% correct. That's something that's just across the board, globally. So it's not just an American thing. I know it happens specifically in Canada.
That's the issue with soft sciences and sociology, though, right? Is that you can't, all other things being equal is not something that you can do. You could attribute that to abortion, but you can also attribute that abortion occurs as nations develop, as material conditions change, as rights increase, as education increases, right? So I mean, I've seen
Sure, but a lot of those
if you have additional
account
studies,
for those
all
things.
those studies typically account for those additional
right, but it's not a hard
causalities.
science.
Well, even in hard sciences, you have those exact same problems. But when you're using data, hard data, then and you're looking at those, again, I helped make these studies. Like, you account for those variables and you identify that as part of like what the other trends are showing within that data. That's like what fucking regression
All right, can I
analysis is.
show
Yeah,
one?
to be
I'm going to
clear
show
as
one
well.
major issue with this. What we're talking about is that we're talking about that maybe causation thing with abortion, more abortions being less crime, but how do we know what the hell that those children would have been when they grew up? They were never given that chance. So we can't say like, well, this definitely would have been a robbery over here and that one over there would have committed. We don't know. They
Preacher.
could have been a president. They could have been
And
a
there's
football player. They could
So
have been something great. We
there's
don't
so
know.
many other variables that occurred.
We're
There's
not
probably
talking
so
about
many more
individual rights. We're just
laws
talking
that
about what's
changed and
overall useful
occurred
for
during
Wait,
this
wait,
time
wait,
period.
wait, wait,
Just
wait,
be-
wait,
woman,
wait,
what could she
wait,
have been?
wait. Okay,
I feel really
wait.
need to address this as the person who's read the study.
Okay, well then Taft.
Is this Donahue and Levitt, just to be clear? Just to clarify? here?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
So maybe
Stop.
you have
Everybody
like, more
stop.
insight
Everybody.
into this.
Okay, 1 second. Sorry, I mean, my mic just must be broken because I thought I was clearly talking, and then I saw other people talking, which I know. You know what it is? I think my headphones are broken, and they must be lagging because no one would be talking at the same time I'm talking because that's against the rules. 30 seconds ago, Kay said something that nobody heard. I didn't hear. Okay. Could you repeat that?
I was just agreeing with Preacher on the fact of like not only knowing what those children could have been, and then also the fact that like there's so many other variables that occur. How many other laws changed during that time? What else was happening around the world and in those areas that they're taking these studies from? Like there's a lot of different shit that can occur, and I haven't read the study, so Taft, I'd love to hear more about it. But there's so many other variables that could have occurred in this time period that would make this not equivalent at all. And we see it a lot. Everyone says it about any other argument, so why would it not be the same with this one?
Okay. You continue.
Okay, so the reason I bring this up is because the effect is comparing like states to themselves, right? So we're not necessarily comparing. We do in this study also compare like states that had legal abortions earlier. So it makes this analysis on multiple levels, but it also compares states to themselves and finds an effect. And it finds that effect happens very rapidly. So the other thing that is important is that this effect isn't just like over time where lots of different laws are happening. You actually see it happen quite immediately. And that's why like the studies, you know, as far as I'm aware, has some robustness against these sorts of criticisms.
Yeah, I definitely have to check it out. But I mean, lead isn't even mentioned in the study, right? So I mean, like, I feel like a study that's not even controlling for that. I mean, because it's looking at its own state and like looking at the change in abortion law, and then 17 years later, it's likely not. I mean, like, I'd have to go through it more to see if there are issues there, but it's not even mentioned.
This study is between 1997 and 2014, so lead would have no implication because de-leaded. I could be wrong, but I thought de-leaded was removed in like the 60s or 70s.
This is the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, there's a 2020 paper.
Right,
Yeah,
but the same inference is made from abortion that's made from lead, which is that you have to wait 20 years in order for the effects to occur, because you're talking about the children more so than you're
we
talking
can
about the
debate,
parent.
bro, this
I'm actually
topic.
like
We can
shocked that
debate,
this is
bro,
being
this.
debated.
I know, I'm so annoyed by this. And so I just want to talk about the pinhead. Oh no, sorry. Somebody said the angels that are dancing on a pinhead. Like, oh, but the person's potential. We already know that 1 in 4 people who can give birth have had an abortion. So 1 out of 4, right? So we already know we can actually interview people and actually ask them, how has your life changed by not having that child? We actually have undeniable evidence. So we can talk about hypotheticals all day. And I have to say this because my chat is going to kill me if I don't. Preacher, you said that it's about following the laws, and if you break the laws, there's consequences. And I just want to say that there was a lot of people not following laws with vaccine mandates. So it's just really interesting. Okay. So my chat's telling me to say that needs to be said.
Well, you could tell your chat that a mandate is not a law, for one thing.
Yeah, that's not at all. It doesn't sit on the same level.
Not at all.
Also, like, it's interesting that you
I didn't
focus
mean to
on the
bring up the
potential of this
vaccine.
like
No, I know.
unborn kid when you don't really particularly seem concerned about the potential of the woman that you're forcing then to give birth and like incur immense financial, physical,
listen,
emotional
sweetheart. I'm not
burden.
forcing anybody to do anything.
Listen,
Did I?
sweetheart,
Did
that
I?
you
Did I?
literally were just talking about that.
Yeah,
You're
no.
like, that child could have been an astronaut. Like,
Yeah.
well, that woman could have had control over her own fucking life and built the life she
She
wanted.
did
so
have
when
control when
wants
she laid in the
kids-
bed with a man and had the
No.
penis in her
So
vagina.
it's about slut shaming. So you're
Wow.
more concerned about punishing women for having the audacity to fuck
Punishing?
losers like you
Listen,
than you
oh,
are
I'm a
about
loser.
actually
You
making
Listen here,
sure
twat
that
waffle. I'm
like
no
the
loser.
kid. Yeah, so
Wow.
You
that,
can
but
bite
is
that
that
one.
like you care more about that than
That's
actually
borderline.
making sure
Listen,
that like
did
her
I
life is
force
good?
any woman to sleep
Is
with any
that what it
guy?
is?
Did I force you to sleep with any guys when you
You're
had your
just
2
slut shaming,
abortions?
dude.
Yeah, I'm no,
This
it's not.
is why the pro-life position is
hold
out
on.
of control.
I have never said it was sluts. I've never once said sluts. You know that. How do you even equate that to sluts?
You just said it twice.
I didn't say slut. Oh,
You
So
literally
by
Three
punishing
times.
women,
said the
for
word
punishing
twat.
women for having the
Waffle?
audacity to like fuck dudes.
That doesn't mean that he's calling them a
that's slut
slut.
shaming.
It's not.
But
No,
like,
he's not slut
do you know what
shaming.
slut shaming is? Do
Okay,
you know
Yes,
what
I
slut
know what
is?
fucking slut shaming
Okay,
is.
You're-
He's
Okay.
literally
all of you,
just saying.
all of you
Okay.
have lost the sauce.
He's saying
Yeah.
that if you are laying in bed, whether it's with one
have to
person,
say
whether
slut
it's with 20, it doesn't fucking matter. You slept with somebody, you had a penis in your vagina, which consequences are from that is a possibility of a fucking child. That's literally what he's saying.
Right,
He's not
so you
saying
want to
you're fucking
punish
bitches.
women
However,
for
that's not
having
a
sex.
standard that we apply
You
to
wanna-
almost anything else that happens to a human being. And this is
Yeah.
why people this is why this issue has to do with sexism. And I don't normally bring up isms, but in this issue it really applies, because if I said, okay, if I don't know, if you open a window, okay, and you go leave your house and take your dog for a walk, and you probably should have closed your window, and then it turned out that someone came into your house and you walk in, are you allowed to kick that person out of your house? Right? I mean, some people in Florida should say that you have a right to like shoot that person if they entered your house. So if that's the case, like, maybe you should have
Oh
closed
my
your window.
God, are you
Maybe
The
you
serious?
should
person
have
chose
no.
to go into your house.
Thank
Right.
you. The person chose to go into your house. The
Eris-
child did
Wait,
not choose to go into a
So you
uterus.
should punish women.
Did you
No, but
did you just make it seem like
You know
it was
what?
a
Hold on.
crazy
Yes.
idea
You
to
know what?
defend
I'm
your
going to
home?
punish women because you know what? It was your
Jesus
choice to
Christ.
sleep with someone and get pregnant. All right. It's not the child's choice. It's your
Wait,
So
choice.
you
you
wanna
said that
punish
you're
the
not okay with
person.
it even in the case of rape.
If that's
You're
the
not
only
consistent with that.
Yeah. So the rape, even when it wasn't the woman's
Okay, we're gonna go to that.
that's
Okay, here's
That's
what
why
you do.
before-
Now we're gonna
because
go down to the
God
less
wanted
than
her to be raped,
1%.
right?
Now we'll go down to
Less
made that
than
choice.
1%.
Now we're going
You
down to
know
less than
rape
1%.
statistics at all?
Okay,
Rape
can
can
I
only be
my
maybe
point
try to
is-
bridge
abortion
this?
is
Rape
less
is
than
less than
1%.
1% of the reason for
Wait, my point. Can I just finish my point?
Okay.
My point is,
Oh my gosh, all you want. Sorry, go ahead.
so my point is that like this issue is not really about people being pro-life, right? This issue is this embedded sexism or misogyny that we all have in us. I mean, I've got it in us, everyone's got it in us, because our society is like that, and it's taught us that for thousands of years, that the core of a woman's role is to give birth. And I really think that behind all of this, where we try to talk about theory, we're trying to say like, oh no, like it's just about like utilitarianism, or it's not philosophically viable, or something like that. At the core, the real thing is that we think that the core of a woman's purpose is to give birth, and the core of a woman's consequence of having sex, because there's no other good reason for her to have sex, is to have a child. And
Absolutely not what I'm saying.
it might not be what you feel like you're saying, but I am almost sure that it is behind the logic.
I'm almost
and
100% you're dead wrong.
no, it's honestly, especially
You're gonna
like
tell me what I think and what I
No,
believe?
especially, yeah. So especially when
Oh,
I
okay, go
asked
ahead,
you,
tell me.
You've been
well,
doing that to
especially when I
us.
asked you,
No, I haven't.
when I
he
asked you to
hasn't.
be consistent about it, right? And you said, do you want me to be honest? And I was like, yes. And then you were honest, and I was like, thank God. Most pro-life people are like never actually honest, right? When you said directly that this was about being hurt, this is about the consequence to a woman having sex was the baby, and I was like, yeah, like that's at the core of this, is that there are consequences to sexuality. This is about punishing women for sexuality, and I honestly, if we want to have, I am so willing to have the argument and to have the discussion on whether or not women should be punished for sexuality. I mean, I've heard some good arguments
No,
from
they
the 16th
shouldn't.
century about it, right? But like but that's not what people say. They try to make it as if it's about a life thing or about the fetus, but it's not really. So it's
Listen,
just like that's
can I
the real
hop in
argument.
here and
Can I
tell you my
please
own
bridge you
thought?
guys? Can I please bridge you guys? Preacher, I promise I'll be
Yeah.
just as charitable
Okay.
to you as Eris. I'm honestly, okay, I'm going to just say this and kind of like shame everyone a little bit. Like, holy shit, this topic matters. And if you think that this topic matters, take it seriously. Stop fucking straw manning, stop yelling over each other, and come in with good facts. I'm actually so frustrated with like most of the panel, not everyone, but it's just like, this has been so ridiculous. Do I think that there are some pro-lifers who are actually just like misogynistic? Probably, but I actually genuinely think most pro-lifers are fundamentally pro-life. When I talk to them, that's basically what they are. The difference is they care about kids more than adult women. That's the reality, but that doesn't make them inherently misogynistic. That basically makes them like ageist, if anything, right? And so like you can disagree with that. And there are issues with certain pro-lifers that do have issues with like women's sexuality. There is problems where like we need to talk about like, okay, so there's some inconsistencies. You're saying you're pro-life and you're pro-autonomy, but there's more consequences for a woman falling into a bed with a man than for a man falling into a bed with a woman. And that seems pretty unfair. And this doesn't seem like a good responsibility. There are conversations to have about this with pro-life folks that are actually functional and useful and meaningful. But I'm going to be honest, like this isn't it. And this topic matters. We need a solution. We all agreed that, well, not everyone who's pro-choice agreed that it should be a federal protection. We have to talk about how to do that, which Josie listed a bunch of different options to go through. We should be talking about that because this matters. And I don't want to assume what pro-lifers think. And I don't want to just like say like it's just sexism inherent because it's like it's such a tainted idea in and of itself.
I'm going to say this. I don't think a woman's sole role is to make babies and have babies. And I don't think a woman's reason for having sex should only be to make babies. Women, to me, if you don't want to have children, that's fine. You're no less of a woman to me. Your choice is your choice. What I'm saying, and to address, I did say before, and I'll say it again. The man that has slept with the woman is just as responsible for that child as the woman is.
So, Preacher,
And
the issue that you run into, though, with that line of thinking is that when abortion isn't legalized, men do have the option to walk away. I work with women with addiction all the time who kept their children, whose man was supposed to stick by. And you can say, well, child support. Most of these men, a lot of them are addicts themselves, and they never pay child support because they can't
I
afford
agree
it.
with that.
So,
I
like, the
agree.
level of responsibility and consequences isn't fair across the genders, which
You're
is
right,
why I
and we
think
can
we
talk
have to
about that.
open up abortion. Like we have to, because it's really shitty. Like single motherhood is so shitty. It's so fucking shitty. And in America, where like there's a lot of broken systems, it is a sentence to being impoverished for most people for the rest of their life, and for that kid growing up with rough situations. Now, I wouldn't say that the kid is better off dead. I don't think that that's the line of argument, but we have to get a more nuanced thing of being like, abortion disproportionately impacts women, and men get the get out of jail easy card when it comes to birth. And that sucks for women.
You could flip that on its other side, right? And say that men are completely fucked by this because we have no say so if a woman wants to get an abortion to be able to have our own child. The issue really here is are you fundamentally grounded in rights? Because that is, even if you're not an ANCAP like me and you don't believe in natural law, I get it, right? You're not going to come there with me tomorrow. But if you're talking about what is and isn't constitutional, right, in terms of deciding what the legislator is allowed and not allowed to do, and we're talking about overturning those things, and what we're really talking about is rights. We're talking about where do these rights occur and where do these rights not occur? Where is the line, and how do we try and we live in a society, but like how do we figure out what those are? And so if you're grounding these things in body autonomy and you're doing so from a tribalistic perspective where you're ignoring the pro-life, I think you're fundamentally losing there. You're losing that argument, and it's just going to sound like a bunch of like a bunch of straw manning and rage and bullshit. But if you're from the pro-life position, I think too, I understand that you believe that there's body autonomy of the right of the child, and that's kind of like from the very beginning. But I mean, this is why I take this position of, does the child have a body? Does the child have the capacity for some level of pain, some level of, like there are lines that we can draw. And this is where I think aristocracy is a little bit right, which is that like we should be trying to realize now that after the Supreme Court is getting rid of this, we're going to have to do this from a legislative perspective. And there's really only two options here. Let the states do whatever they want to do, and we can continue to have red states and blue states where people move out, and we can continue a diaspora of, people leaving blue states into red states and vice versa. Or we can come to a piece of legislation that people can agree on. And the only way that I see that is a fairly restricted abortion, and possibly allowing medical boards to determine when that is. And it needs to be constrained heavily, and it needs to come with foster care and adoption reform in those regards. Other than that, this emotional arguing about like to one extreme or the other isn't going to do anything but galvanize people away from from pro-choice into the pro-life people, and vice versa. It's not conducive to any solution that is the point of the topic.
Okay, so
I agree. Oh, sorry.
I think it's time probably to wrap up. We only have like 11
I
more
had
minutes.
another 30 minutes to talk, but whatever.
It's way bright. It's almost 6 a.m. here in Poland. So I want to make sure
I'm
that
supposed to be on GTA 5 already.
So I'm gonna give you all time to wrap up. You're gonna have outro statements. This is where you give your final thoughts, and you also shout out your channel. Please remember to do so. I'm going to start with Taftaj. Thank you all for coming on. And again, chat, any donations, subs, anything like that be appreciated. Hippy Dippy is every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be live next Friday, like always.
Great, thanks, Dylan. Taftaj, follow me on Twitter and elsewhere because I do political conversations, and I'll probably do more Twitch streaming in the future. I also post sexy pictures online, if that's something you're interested in. In regards to just like final closing thoughts, I think that there's like a lot of good reasons to want to preserve access to abortions, safe abortions. But I also think that like within the constitutional framework, I think it's okay if some states restrict abortion access and deal with the consequences of that. I also think it's like if there is enough political will to pass something, ideally that something that is passed is going to enable abortion. Because again, I think abortion is, if you have to choose one side or the other, it's better to have free and safe access federally for abortions than to ban it. So I'd prefer that. And I agree with some of what like Fabian Scott Liberty is saying in regards to like passing, legislature. We need to make sure that it is safe and that we also like enable like adoption and whatnot. So if that's something people are interested in. But yeah, that's overall where I come down on the issue.
And oh yeah, you already shouted stuff out. Okay, Preacher.
Yeah, Preacher570 here on Twitch. I do politics, history, all that happy jazz, I guess variety streamer you'd call it. I just simply believe that Roe versus Wade being overturned is a good thing, kicking it back to states where it belongs. I try to have some concession to say at least a heartbeat, but if I'm being honest, I would rather no abortion, to be honest with you. And it's not because I hate women. It's not because I want to punish women. It is because I don't like to see life being snuffed out. Plain and simple. I just think I strongly believe in personal responsibility, but I know personal responsibility is a thing of the past these days, and who the hell am I to think people should have that? So I'll leave it at that.
Throwing it over to Not So Erudite, and will you be streaming after stream today?
Yeah, I'll probably stream for a little bit longer.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Not So Erudite. I really appreciate you guys having here. I really appreciate the level of like emotional connection that people are actually having to this topic, because I think it really, really matters. And I think I really appreciate like Eris and other individuals like really doing the good work of advocating, being like, this is an emotional topic and it has to be. We can't devoid ourselves from these emotions and this matters, right? I just want to encourage, I think, mostly for the pro-choicers, I think when it comes to like staunch pro-lifers, I would talk to preacher at like the religious level and kind of follow him down. I don't think I'd move him, but I might move some religious people, right? Because I really think church and state have to be separate. And regardless of what you view about like life, you can't impose your religious beliefs on others. I just want us like pro-choicers, like I really want to be thinking about like how do we get women access to this, like what I would argue is like a fundamental right in this United States, because it's inevitable that this bill is going to be overturned. Roe v. Wade and Casey are probably done for, which is really scary. Secondarily, I think it's actually important. People need to think about like, what does this mean for the Supreme Court? Like, what is it? Is it a political body? Why is it a political body? And how do we protect it from not being a political body if it has become one? I just think there's a lot of really, really important topics all kind of laced into this one thing. And I think it's understandable that people get heated about it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm going to throw it over to Maddie.
Yeah, so sorry I wasn't nice to people that want me to be a human incubator. I'm sorry for hurting your feelings. And I'm sorry that I'm not being so charitable to that. And if we want to talk about what motivates people, what changes minds, I work in electoral politics. I work with campaigns. I know that there are some people in the pro-life camp I am not going to convince. They are already far gone. It's the same concept if you work in marketing and you're looking for people who you're trying to convince to buy your product. There are some that just aren't going to go for it. But what you need and what actually changes minds is hearing that human element, that this isn't just something that happens on the fringes to just like some loose women who want to run away from having to deal with the consequences of their actions. A woman in your life that you love has had an abortion. There are women in your lives, you may not even know it, that have had an abortion and whose life has benefited from having access to abortion. And that's just simply the reality. And I know people are saying, oh, but it's not going to be the same in all states, or, oh, you can just move. For the most marginalized women in our country, that's not an option. For wealthy women, abortion will continue just as it has before. They can go to a state that has legal abortion. They can have it whenever they need to because they can afford to do that. But to say someone can just move to where it's legal is completely ignoring the material conditions that impact people's lives and people who are stuck in a cycle of poverty, who can't just afford to up and move and who need relief now, regardless of where they live, because the right to bodily autonomy is a human right. I should not have fewer rights to my own bodily autonomy than a corpse. You cannot force someone to be an organ donor and have to give up their organs. Even if they decide not to, someone else will die. You cannot force someone to do that. So you should not force someone, especially in a country without guaranteed paid family and sick leave, without universal childcare, with insanely expensive and inaccessible healthcare. Do not force them to give birth because that is fucking monstrous. And I get heated because, again, I've had 2 abortions. It has made my life better and I'm better for it. And I can't wait to actually start a family because now I have a solid foundation to give those kids the life they deserve. I'm Maddie Cakes _ on Twitch, on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Mads Maru, MADSMARU. And also, I don't think enough attention was paid to how cute Fabian's cat was. Fabian, I'm a big fan of fat cats. So thank you for letting your cat grace us with its presence. Thanks.
Cat didn't get any speaking time. Gonna throw it over to Kay.
Say the conversations we had tonight definitely went different than I expected them to. I do think we spent a lot of time debating on like if we're pro-choice or pro-life and where those fall and how to like push the boundaries of what we were or what the other person is. I personally, when going into these debates, don't plan on like changing anyone's mind. I believe what I believe, you believe what you believe, and that's how it is. I'm not going to force anyone to believe anything that they grew up around or don't have belief systems that base those off. I will continue to talk about how I feel about things, and maybe that will make you open your eyes to a little bit of other things, and maybe we can bounce on the boundary a little bit more. rather than just being complete polar opposites. I do think that we finally at the end got to more of like talking points of like how do we fix these issues, like if we want them to be pro-life or pro-choice, like how do we solve other issues that occur around these things. And I think there needs to be more discussions on those. And it'd be great to hear a lot more talking points around those than just us bickering and fighting over things that aren't going to change anything. But it was a great time talking to you guys. K-Buck off Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. I rarely stream ever because I play too many RP games. And I hate streaming them, but I appreciate you having me on.
I'm muted. Happy to have you on. Now I'm going to throw it over to Josie.
Yeah. Okay. So bringing it back to what Maddie said with like there's also a class issue here. There's also the fact that there's 400,000 children in the foster care system, the fact that 1 in 4 childbearing people have had an abortion. You have the reality that this is affecting tons of people across this country. This is going to put undue burden on folks, and it's not allowing folks to be able to take personal responsibility of their own lives to say, "Hey, I can't have a child," right? Because we talked about like it's a personal responsibility that you had sex, so therefore you suffer the consequences and have to bear a child and have to do that. But there's also a personal responsibility of like saying, "Hey, I can't bear a child because I'm a teenager or because I'm in poverty or because this was a one night stand that went sideways." It doesn't matter. We should give people the autonomy over themselves to make these decisions that is better for the living, breathing human that exists right in front of us. Because like I said, 1 in 4, okay? So we can interview those people. Maddie was generous enough to share her story about her personal life and has demonstrated that her life is better because she was able to plan out and do actual family planning to actually give a child, if she chooses to have one, a better life. And I'm grateful for that. And we should be able to say, look, people should be able to family plan in that way. We should allow people to take personal responsibility instead of forcing it on people. And that's really what it is. And there's implications of if it's going to be seen as murder, are we going to start punishing, or is there going to be a hardline pro-life position? Is it going to be just pandemonium in certain states? There's a possibility now, and that's scary. And one of our greatest protections of people who can give birth has been stricken down, something that has only been around for 18 years, not even a full generation. This is tragic, and we should all be outraged at the forcing of people to no longer have autonomy over their own lives. So you can follow me on Josie Rose C on Twitch. You can also follow me on social media by the same name. I am a cozy political streamer, not a cozy. I am a cozy political streamer. You cannot take that word from me, okay? Because we're cozy at the Love Nest, okay? I'm not affiliated with any media networks of the same name. All right. But anyways, thank you everybody for having this conversation. I know it can get heated. And last thing I like to say though, what a preacher, you shouldn't be tossing words around like schwat waffle to a woman, especially about a debate around abortion. That was very not cool of you. I just wanted to say that at the end. All right, Fabian, I guess you're next.
And Fabian?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of things we talked about in terms of the leak. I think the leak really is damaging for everyone because of the fact that we have a draft of majority opinion without the dissenting opinions, and I think that it has caused a lot more panic than what is due. It's obviously a galvanizing force for the left, but at the same time, I wonder if these kind of like these extreme forms of argumentation and fear mongering don't actually hurt the left because it alienates normal people that are just like listening to people saying like they're coming for interracial marriage next. And it's like, the fuck are you talking about? Clarence Thomas's wife is white. Like, what do you mean? Right. And not that that's necessarily connected, but it just sounds insane. And we want to have a rational conversation here. My issue that I have with the pro-choice movement is that they invoke body autonomy. They invoke body autonomy pretty much only when it comes to abortion, and almost never invoke it in any other regard, because it's an effective argument, because they can pretend like they believe in body autonomy, but they don't. Maddie says, well, it's ridiculous that I would have less rights than a corpse. And it's like, well, there are a lot of corpses that have been dismembered via abortion, and clearly women had more rights than those dismembered corpses that are left. The fact of the matter is that it needs to actually be grounded in body autonomy. And the way that you ground the philosophy in body autonomy is that once a fetus is developed in such a way that it has its own body and it has some functioning, you do not have a right to dismember that body. You do not have a right to destroy its sinful. You do not have a right to murder it. There's something known as the gentleness principle. We heard this analogy brought up that, well, what if someone comes into your home? Do you kill them? Is this, how would you get rid of this person? Would you shoot and kill them? Or if they were there by no fault of their own, would you gently carry them outside and say, hey, this is my home. You're not supposed to be here. And that's what evictionism is about. Once a baby is formed, and you can't just kill it, no matter the circumstance. You must perform a C-section. You must get rid of the child if it is your will, to your own bodily choice, to have that baby not be a part of you. And that's the legal opinion, not the moral opinion. My name is Scott from Fabian Liberty. We're a duo anarcho-capitalist stream. We read philosophy, twice a month. We, do some movie nights. We do a lot of political content, as well as debates and things like that. And recently, because it's May, we're going to start doing, we're prepping for Kenobi on the 27th to do some watch parties, because I'm a big Star Wars nerd and playing Fallen Order. So any of those things, come and hang out, and, check us out on Twitter, Discord, and everything. Thank you so much for having me, Dylan.
Happy to have you. Now I'm throwing it over to Eris to wrap us up.
So first of all, I just want to say how much I enjoyed being on this panel tonight. Especially like I got to meet so many people that I had heard about. And it was really cool to be just on a panel with so many underrepresented minorities, like women and caps and conservatives. So that was super cool. And also, I still, at my core, when people talk about the abortion debate, like they're always talking about when a fetus is a life, whether or not I actually believe that the fetus is a life. I just think it doesn't matter whether or not it's a life. It's about whether or not it has the right to use someone else's body without their permission. And the fact that we don't apply this concept consistently, like across the board, even emotionally, I find that I don't apply it across the board. Tells me that we still do have some like unresolved, biases, and we seem to put there is something special to us about a woman being pregnant and a woman having a baby. And I think if people deny that, uh, it's very strange to me, because to me that feels very special. I grew up being taught that was special. I think most people do. And it's not something that's rational, and it is somewhat of a bigotry, and it's something that we should all be aware of, right? And I don't think it makes you like a shitty person or anything to think about it, but I just wish that we were more honest that that was the issue. It's not the issue for everyone, but I think it is the issue for a lot of people who claim to be pro-life. Because again, there's so many other much more rational and practical ways to reduce abortions besides for taking away a woman's choice. I want to empower women to choose life, and a huge part of that is putting them in positions, and supporting policies and all of that kind of stuff that put them in a situation where where they want to choose choice, where they want to choose life, and this way a baby doesn't get brought into the world unwanted. we know that there are huge consequences to being brought into the world unwanted. So I would focus on that instead. If you wanted to reduce abortions, I think that just makes so much more sense. Um, and also women have been getting abortions for thousands of years. Women will always be getting abortions. The question is whether or not they're going to have access to safe abortions. So that's also something to keep in mind. And also, again, I am aristocracy. I do things. Tonight wasn't really something I could apply history too much to, but normally I look at political issues through a historical lens. I try not to be. This is one of the few issues where I'm actually very left. Normally, and sometimes I can be very right on something. I'm not really a very political person in general, so I try to look at things without an ideological basis as much as one can. So yeah, you should follow me at Aristocracy TV.
Thank you so much. Once again, everybody, next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at twitch.tv/DylanBirdsTV. Every Friday, we do this. Why? Because who else is going to fund the American healthcare industry by giving you all brain tumors? You all have a splendid weekend. Thank you all for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you all. Awesome.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Deuces.
1 second. I'm trying to get it up. Let's end today's stream with some fan art. Somebody made Dylan Cat. Dylan Cat's real, and you can't deny him. Dylan Cat's real. Dylan Burns? Ah.